trying to make sure we didn't add anything, but you've got a different copy.
I have a question on that topic. That was
Sure.
but just want to ask a question. We've given money to the history project in the past, the town has. And I'd like to extend a courtesy to the Historical Society, the Historical Commission, to just look at it. I don't want to create any hardships on anyone, but since the town put money into the history project, it seems like a nice thing to be able to just let people see it before it goes to press. We can put that on the agenda at some point in the future, but I was thinking that last year when we gave them the money, that the public ought to be able to see it and comment on it, you know, because it was their money that went into the book.
I believe there's some people from the Historical Society that are on the board working on doing that.
Well, we can bring that up as we get closer. Did they mention when it was going to be done?
Well, they were hoping they were going to start putting it together this spring. I believe that was the, so we ready.
Are they coming back to us for more money to do the printing?
Actually, they sounded like they were in pretty good shape. They were just running us up to date on what we wanted, that's what they wanted to use this money for that we had voted.
I get the sense that they know they might need some, they just weren't at a point right now to say.
And they have submitted a budget request.
Oh, they have. So then we can express those concerns at that time.
But they did not at all seem like they were urgent, like they were out of money, that they had any big.
Good.
The only thing I'm spotting at the end, we had been including a copy of the agenda that went with that meeting. We started doing that a while back. And there was also a note about the draft changes. Somehow that disappeared off the end.
Draft changes to, oh, the,
Or
no,
maybe
yes.
the two, yeah. I think the draft was always included as the document that got changed. If I'm not mistaken, that was the older version. Exact wording.
You're referring to the copy of the draft.
Right, it gets included
As
because the
amended.
final is, and then we were also including a copy of the minutes that we had before us at the board meeting. Right.
I think it looks real complete except for the addition of the agenda and, see on mine here, it does have these minutes were discussed a minute and approved at the select board meeting dated.
Right, I think there's, the draft is a document.
Oh, right, okay.
Right.
I understand. That's about what you found?
That's pretty much all I found.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of December 30th, 2013.
Second?
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? One abstention? All right, now we can move on to January 6th, 2014.
Since we just came off the 30th minutes, probably halfway through the second page, it says Kohler makes a motion to accept the minutes of 12/30/13 as amended. I wasn't here, so I was here, but we just approved the minutes of the 30th, so that must be a different date, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And
Where are you on?
right in the middle of the, under minutes, second page, it says Kohler makes a motion to accept minutes of 12:30, which we just approved, as amended with inclusion of document 16.
Now, mine says Kohler makes a motion to accept the minutes of 12:16.
No, this says 12:30.
Mine says 12:30.
Oh, so she must have fixed it. That makes
And I
sense.
remember we did those. Right, that would be 12:16.
So 12:16 is correct.
Okay, so it looks like you have a new copy.
Phil is wrong in this 15.
Well, because maybe after I saw her working on it, and I said, oh, Phyllis used about one S. And then maybe she changed that afterwards, this part.
But mine says 12:30. I'm looking to see when we did that, but I didn't find it. I would have thought that was the 16th as well.
16, I know it was.
I have a little correction too, Mary, when you're ready here. On the first page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs down, there's a lot on Kohler and his position on the vacant police chief. In the middle of that it says Kohler informs the board that he's an advocate for Wilder. And, you know, that was somewhat secondary. What I did say was Kohler informs the board that he supports the chief's recommendation for Wilder to act as an interim police chief. Then, if you want to add, and is an advocate, you know, as a somewhat of a secondary thing, that's okay, but I don't want it to come out that I just advocated for her. I was supporting the police chief's recommendation. And then, further on, it says Kohler questions Wilder regarding her, and it wasn't her appearance as much as I said continued presence out and about the town. So I had no problem with her appearance, you know, it's just her continued presence out and about the town. And then I said Wilder, instead of advises, acknowledges her continued presence. Just real simple. That was all I had. And other than the standard, attach the documents as amended and such.
Paulette, do you have anything on? I was just reading your paragraph that Lynn has set aside when you shared your position. It looked pretty straightforward to how I remember it. That was our main reason for having that meeting.
Will it cause issues? I think there's a it. Will it cause issues? Seeing it back. Otherwise it reads funny.
Will it cause issues?
Yeah, because otherwise it just seems to read funny.
Under the motion for the police, I think there's a little typo where it says the following terms. I'm sure that my motion was to engage personnel as needed up to 5, she has up to 5 hours per week, but I was sure it was 6 hours. And the next paragraph below it says 6 hours.
Yeah.
So that's in number 3 in your motion.
Anything else?
Just towards the end. I think the document listed at the end is the same inclusion of the agenda and the draft. Minutes.
discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. So we have one set of minutes hanging out from January 13th.
And 15. We had a special presentation, but we conducted, very simple. And the presentation's up on the web, so, right?
Yes, and Lynn was here, I think, taking notes.
Yeah,
That,
It should be
short,
easy.
very short,
cut and dry.
right, because
So-
it did.
So since I wasn't here, you want to take a few minutes and bring me up to date on how it went?
You want to do it?
I will summarize quickly, it went very well, but I would love to have Ron explain, because he's done a lot of work on this.
Right. Was there a good crowd?
It's a good crowd. And Janet showed up, so the finance committee was able to have a quorum. And that was a good thing. And the select board had its meeting too, so we had a meeting within a meeting. And these guys did their presentation on both the Ashfield proposal, the lake proposal, that is before us right now. And after the first hour, questions were entertained, and we go to the field, the retention wall. There were some neighbors from there, the Norarkis were there, I think, and Dennis was there, and so there was a pretty good representation from that road.
All of them?
Alden was there, definitely,
Good.
and there was interest in it, so it was a good meeting. It was right on the clock, 8 to 9, 7 to 8, and then 8 to 9 questions, and they were good. You know, they came, Chris Aker came from Worcester, and Butcher came from the other side, I think Springfield somewhere, Westfield. And so they're standing by, waiting. And the trustees are having a meeting, I believe, this week to talk about action on their part. And it was good. A lot of interest.
What's your feeling on moving forward with this after the presentation, I guess is?
I would just say on the wall, there's a sense of probably more urgency, because if it falls over, it's going to be a mess, if you ask me. I didn't get a sense on the lake. I think that's going to have to come to the floor, and people are going to have to think about it, you know. But it was a good presentation. It went through all the scope items, the hydraulic survey and the field survey, the easement, and all those, you know, the trees and the interest in protecting a few trees and stuff like that. So they did a really, really good job. They showed leaks coming out of the dam and the concern to not let it degrade even more.
Did a lot of pictures and PowerPoint, and the fact that it's out there, you can go back and look at it again.
Yeah, that was
Did
good.
this again? Yeah, you don't hear the voices, but you see they had
The presentation.
good PowerPoint.
On the wall, you reminded me, Paul, that they had options on different kinds of walls too. You know, anything from taking it back at an angle with riprap to, I can't remember the names of them, but some precast type walls and so on and so forth. So it was interesting.
And they did give us some rough idea of cost,
For square foot.
depending which wall approach.
This is on the field, the
Wall
wall.
and field, yeah.
So, the lake, $77,000 was burned into my mind.
I thought it was 87, but you're probably right.
What kind of number are they talking about on the wall?
That was, and this is an assessment survey, because they're going to look at different options to go forward. So they don't know until they do the geotechnical borings and look at the elevations and all that stuff. But it was 18,000, of which the wall is 2/3 the field's responsibility, the trustees, and 1/3 is our responsibility. It has nothing to do with constructing the wall, because from a construction viewpoint, I think our exposure is less, because the wall's just starting out there. It's actually in pretty good shape. But from the study's point of view, it's all going to require survey. It's all going to require geotechnical, you know, all the assessment of it, is probably a third and two-thirds. So we're looking at a minimum of like 6,000. But we need the trustees to weigh in on it. Otherwise, we're just doing a third of the wall.
So the feeling at the meeting was that
Pretty
it needs to
positive.
be done.
Yeah, I think so, wouldn't you?
The sense, well, the trees, we talked about, could you get the trees out, just cut them off so they'd stop interfering with the wall, but it seemed like you'd have to be very careful not to disturb the wall, just to stop if you stop the tree from growing, it might stop doing this with its roots and making a bigger mess. But it's going to be very hard to go a third of the way down and stop, because I think when you get to the third, it's fairly high.
Yeah, just talking about cutting the bank back. Oh, I see what you're saying, the third, right.
Yeah, the third.
It's
where you
really not an
cut.
option, but it's not our property, so.
Right.
And someone, I think, pointedly asked Alden, where do the trustees stand on this? And he says, I really can't say until we have a formal meeting. But he brought it to our attention, so clearly there's interest in some sort of it, right?
And there's concern at the end
Yeah,
on the field, if I'm not mistaken, that in the picture, that's where the great big trees are.
yeah.
And work down there, even if you just were doing a wall instead of tapering it back, might end up
I think it's
hurting those
those
trees. It's too bad.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Was Dennis Gibson here?
It was it, yeah.
He would have a real
Two
interest.
properties. Yeah.
So, well, the reason I'm asking, since we're talking about special town meeting in March, would, in my mind, the lake is too big an apple for me to take a bite out of. But I was
At a special town meeting.
at a special town meeting, but I was wondering if the trustees want to get behind it and would want to get started on it. Would you be feeling that at special town meeting, we would want to try to appropriate our share for that?
I don't think we have to, because we've set it aside already, right? We've got something like 15 there. And we only need 6 for our share to do the assessment survey. And I talked to Alden today, and I reminded him that we have a March special town meeting, and he says, I'm going to meet with them on Thursday. So he knows time is in our favor right now.
And so we have 15 for the wall.
Yeah. So we don't need
Yeah, but
it.
see, in my mind,
How
when
much
we
do we
voted,
have?
when,
I'm sorry. Well, 15?
It says 15, but we were talking, it was 18, our third is 6. Do you have something else in mind for the 15, though?
well, in my mind, when we vote that kind of money, I'm thinking of actually getting work done and not necessarily doing the study, kind of figuring on doing the work.
Mhm.
So I just want to lay it out there. I mean, at some point, you're going to have to come up with money to actually do something after you do the study, so.
My question is, how do you do this in terms of paying the bill? Does Ty and Bond have to give us a bill for 6 and then a bill for 12? Does Ty and Bond give us the whole bill and the field people reimburse us? Because if that's the case, then you're going to want an extra 3 to cover the 18. But if they're going to divvy the bill up in thirds or 2/3, there's no problem with that part.
I get a sense we need to hear back from Alden based on this Thursday. They have some IRS issues they're dealing with right now, and they're going through it, they're getting through it. So he made it sound like after, it's a tax exempt status sort of thing that they're dealing with. He made it sound like he'd have some answers this Thursday.
And we didn't really ask the audience to weigh in. They could ask questions, but we didn't sort of have a feeling of whether or not people,
So
didn't do a straw vote of any kind, like
Yeah.
anything.
So it was hard to get a vibe.
It was, definitely. And we were trying to get cost assessment, but they were very clear that, we need to get through this study before we can tell you what it's going to cost, the dollars on that sort of thing. It's important.
Even, I was trying to figure out how, for the annual town meeting, if you're looking at 77 just to do the assessment for the dam. That's a big number. I mean, a grader is easy to understand, but that whole business with the dam, I was wishing there was some way to have a handout or something, even if it's printing the PowerPoint or something, or a subset of the PowerPoint, so people could see something, because otherwise, as we talk about it, we've spent hours looking at it. If you're in the audience, it doesn't all connect well, except that it's a big price tag, and it doesn't have a clear picture. It's not a...
I was thinking I'd have the burden of trying to do something that was plain vanilla, plain simple, with maybe some of their stuff, and I'd be glad if either of you two wanted to do it. I don't want to get up there and sound like I'm advocating for them, but I understand the situation a little bit. If there was a good exhibit for the annual town meeting, just to get people's minds around it, even if we don't do anything this year, it gets it in their mind, you know?
I wonder if we should start not promoting it in the sense that we're promoting that we do it, but promotion materials in the sense that people can see it in the newspaper, that this is what it looks like, because it's hard to come to the meeting and suddenly you've got to decide on $77,000 or $80,000. And I just remember last year, the grader came up, and some people were concerned they hadn't heard anything about it. So this kind of seems to fall into that same arena.
I was hoping to say, and I know it's not a good answer, but that's why we had the public hearing. And the finance committee was here.
Right.
Sorry you couldn't make it, but that's why we had that. And it was a great meeting. It really answered all those questions. And sorry you couldn't have been there, but...
I think there were about 38 people, right?
Yeah,
It
it was a well-attended meeting, and it was really properly posted, and I think it was a good job overall. It's just a big number to handle.
Well, I think the wall, I think that shouldn't be a huge deal. If our obligation really is a third of it. And I can certainly see, especially the people that live underneath it would think that it's quite a lot more urgent than water running down the brook. But as far as the dam goes, I don't think the town has ever really been served very well by kind of turning our back and not making a plan to attack it. And I think we're all of the same mind that eventually something's got to be done there. So,
And the longer you wait, the worse it's going to get.
and I've been kind of thinking about it, like going through the budget, trying to figure out where that money would come from. And my theory at this point, until we get numbers really hammered out, is, we'd have to hit that dam project, just the study portion of it, the same way that you'd eat an elephant. You're going to take one bite at a time, and it might take 2 or 3 years to appropriate enough money to get there to do that and then move forward. But in your discussions, Ron, with the engineer, if we're showing some forward motion, the inspectors are going to look on that quite favorably.
Well, I think if we can get the easements that are going to hopefully come up in one of our town meetings behind us, that was one of the recommendations. So in the inspection report, so if there's some things that we can show that we're moving forward, it's got to work for us. My only personal drive for this was I could use, maybe not this year, but next year as a time to go aggressively for a grant. And one of the things that came out in the meeting that was very enlightening is last year it was a September deadline. This year the state's moved it up to June, I believe. And June is too late for these guys to get the study done. So it's almost a fait accompli that they can't, even if we put it all in a special town meeting, I talked to them after, it's going to be very difficult for them to get the study done. So if we could get into the annual town meeting in May and set money aside, then in the spring of the next year, my last term, on the select board, I can put the pedal to the metal and try to get a grant. Because the grant is the next phase. That's going to cost the money, not the $80,000.
I agree with you. I think even though that number is big, trying to divvy it up over a number of years, I think will only make it more expensive. And it's almost, it's a big nugget, but you've got to find out what's going on, because you've got to know what that next step looks like.
That's
Because
important.
that may be the piece that has to take 2 or 3 years to get grant money, or if not grants, then we've got to attack it a little at a time, because it will
Yeah.
probably be a much bigger number, is my guess.
That's kind of where my head's at too. I mean, it would be good to get that study behind us before September of next year. This year, so that we can work on the grant in spring of next year. But that would require having the
Right, if they want
40,000.
grant applications in June, the state must have some really big ideas on how fast and how good their budget process is gonna be.
And there's never any guarantee, of course.
Weren't they still screwing with the budget in July last year?
Yeah. But they did award,
For the school, remember?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So, all right, well, good, thanks for doing that. I'm sorry I couldn't be
no,
there.
that was fine, it was well attended.
So we'll add January 15th to the
Okay. We have an appointment with Christopher Gray, but I think he's in assuming the position with the Historical Commission, so we'll skip him for now. He's used to waiting for us anyway after last.
Exactly.
Okay, old business. Disaster recovery grant.
Yes, I need some signatures from the chair.
This was the letter from a couple of meetings ago that the governor told us, right, that he informed us that this was the 300.
Yes, for the road repair.
Smith Road. Attached are the signature pages for the grant application. I believe the selectmen may have already voted to sign off on these. We did, I remember that. If not, we can go back to doing that. $375,000.
How much?
It says the CDBG funding will cover 375.
375, I think you said 8.
375.
Yeah.
Are there any questions on this? We want to grab onto it.
Nothing like free money.
That 375 is 366,900 for facilities and infrastructure and 8,100 for administration.
Right, that goes to the,
I gotta sign
A
here.
lot of signatures, so. The rest of it is fine print.
Maybe sign a deal that if you displaced anybody, but there's no homes down there, there's no, any homes would have been washed away if they were down there. Comes on and shuts off. dated 8/13. We got a correspondence from the Office of the Attorney General. We were copied on, sent to Suzanne Corbett. Said this office received your complaint dated August 13th of 13, alleging that the Ashfield Select Board violated the open meeting law. The complaint was originally filed with the board on or about July 9th, and the board responded to the original complaint letter by letter dated July 31st. In your complaint, you allege that the board's January 16th meeting minutes lack specificity, and that these minutes were omitted in the board's meeting minute book when you visited the town clerk's office on July 3rd. Additionally, you allege that since February, the board's meeting minutes have lacked sufficient specificity, and the minutes from approximately 45 meetings were missing from the meeting minute book. First, complaints alleging violations of the open meeting law must be filed with the public body within 30 days of the alleged violation. All complaints shall be in writing using the form approved by the Attorney General and available on the Attorney General's website. Because the January 16th, 2013 meeting minutes, this January 16th, they were approved on June 3rd, any complaint regarding the sufficiency of those minutes must have been filed by July 3rd. We therefore find this allegation untimely and decline to review it. We note, however, that in its response, the board pledged to amend those meeting minutes to include additional detail. Second, we decline to review your allegation regarding the specificity of all meeting minutes since February 2013 because our office will not conduct broad audits of public bodies based on generalized allegations. Finally, your remaining allegations concerning the town clerk's meeting minutes book, even if proven true, would not constitute violation of the open meeting law. Records management and retention is handled by the supervisor of records of the Secretary of the Commonwealth and not governed by the open meeting law. Because our review concerns only compliance with the open meeting law, we decline to review allegations that the board violated other laws. We now consider this matter closed. Hannah Rush. So there's a lot of dates in there.
January, June.
Well, it was filed, yeah, it was filed in August. It was filed in August about meetings in January. Yes, it goes back, so good, we've got that. That one's behind us. All right. Mary, you want to jump ahead? We have a victim or a candidate rather for Board of Health.
We do, and I brought a letter for you to sign, but I just spoke to Betty. The chair of the board would like you to appoint Carrie O'Gorman to the unexpired Board of Health term, so it'll run until the election. I brought you a letter addressed to Kathleen O'Gorman, which was the only one in the book, but it's apparently the wrong one.
Okay.
So, if you want to vote to make the appointment, I can sign the letter which instructs, would instruct her to contact Dan downtown clerk.
So it's somewhere on the street. Carrie is
Carrie's on Bug Hill Road,
yes.
and I addressed this to Greenbury Road. There's
Betty.
Duncan didn't show up yet. He had another meeting. He thought
Okay.
he would be back by now.
Okay.
Thought he'd be back by 8, but as meetings go,
Yeah, well, I
probably ran over. But anyway, I can just fill you in a little bit. And Carrie is a nurse. She actually Shelley talked to her at the spaghetti dinner,
Okay.
and she expressed an interest in helping the town in some part. She likes the town. She's in a position now where she feels like she can help the town. And then when Shelley explained that, you know, they were going to need a temporary filling until the May election, she just jumped all over it. She was really interested. She has already said she would be willing to run the flu clinic next year. She really has plans to have some sort of a public health clinic on a semi-regular basis, you know, just for routine stuff like blood pressure checks and those kinds of things. Things that used to happen before, but then there's been a lapse, and they had investigated last year about the FERCOG nurse, but that would have been quite an expense. So she really seems like very interested in trying to help out.
But this appointment would
It would only go until May because she would have to be elected on her own and it would give her a couple of months to see but she's already projecting herself that she's going to be interested for next fall for the flu clinic. So I really don't. I mean, I've known her. I knew her all through high school. And
So she's local town?
yeah, she actually came originally from Shelburne and Coleraine, that direction.
Okay.
But she went to Mohawk, yeah.
How does she spell her first name, do you know?
Pardon?
Is it Carrie, as in C-A-R-Y?
Carrie.
Yeah.
So,
O'Gorman.
so there must be
apostrophe
some
Gorman.
other official first name, possibly some,
No, I don't think
no,
She's
Carrie?
always been known. I've never known her anything
Okay.
else but Carrie.
What
Okay,
is she a practicing nurse now?
Yes, she works at Bay State Health in the new wound clinic that they've just opened. And she's worked in the Bay State Health system. I think she worked somewhere else for a while, but she's worked. She didn't go into nursing school right out of high school. She did other things for a while, and then she decided, I really want to be a nurse, and then went to nursing school.
Well, go ahead.
When we fill in an expired term, I'm not so familiar with that process. I know it's a joint effort between the select board and usually the other board, right? Like the health board.
Well, they'll normally come to us.
Well, I thought the bylaw stated that it had to be a joint effort somehow. They make a recommendation and then we approve. I thought it was a formal thing, but no?
and there's something special in the, I remember when Norm was on the board.
Yeah.
There's something special having a new board of health, but they usually do it.
Well, the Board of Health has independence generally from the select board when they hire their own employees, etc. However, for to these situations, the select board would take it at the recommendation of the chair.
Are you thinking that for an elected official,
That's
that it's
exactly
the remaining members of that board and the board of selectmen?
that have to sanctify it, you know, make it happen. But I don't, that's only my thoughts, it's not, I have to look it up.
I have some thought on that too. I mean, I
And
have
does
some
that just
recollection of that.
understanding from the chair that the current board is requesting this?
Yeah, it formally with a letter or just came to you? or-
No, the chair came to me and said that.
Yeah, but maybe we can just wait and see if he shows up.
Then
So
we'll
that-
have to vote.
Yeah,
We'll have enough.
makes sense, exactly.
I was at their last meeting, it wasn't a topic on their agenda. I don't know if they have to have it on, like, call their own meeting, have it on the agenda.
Enough to run our own meeting, but then we can hold, Jumpins add another meeting.
Yes, a Board
And-
of Health regional meeting, done it for health.
And he was gonna stop here on his way back. That's fine. I just don't wanna hold up an
I
appointment.
don't either.
But don't they have a meeting, I think their next meeting is the 11th, so
mean, if the three of us wanted to vote yes, we would have a majority of that 5 people, right? Why don't we skip over this for, until Duncan gets back?
Yeah, because it would be nice if she could make the next meeting.
It would be, I think it would be great, I mean,
He was
it's
he
filling
was
it
going
up.
to call her after he finished his first meeting to see if she could come, but she unfortunately contracted pink eye the last few days, so she was kind of quarantined at home, but like today, she might have been enough.
That's a benefit of working in the health industry, isn't it?
Pardon?
Pink eye, that would be a benefit of working in the health.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it would just be filling in this 100 days or so until the election. But let's skip over it for now. Hampshire Power, we got a price deal? We got a contract, more money to?
We do, and
This
it's,
isn't for the solar power.
no,
This is
no,
for
this
our
is the
regular-
regular cooperative purchase of power. It won't begin until the spring because rates are high right now. And so they don't want to lock in a rate until the winter.
So this is from Jeff Rogers from Hampshire Council on Governments. Electricity markets have been volatile over the past few weeks. Our market analysis shows that long-term prices have been steadily rising since early December, and winter pricing is still predicted to continue on this trajectory. It is clear that a low long-term price is not a possibility at this date if it includes the months of January and February. Therefore, we propose the following. Sign the attached fixed price electricity contract, which includes a 9 cent per kilowatt hour price and a term of approximately 21 months with a spring 2014 start date. Says leave this blank, we will not lock you in until the price is at or below 9.01 cents per kilowatt hour. We will then return your accounts to a WECO default service from now until the contract start date. This will put you in the 9.1 to 11.2 cent price range and removes the threat of real-time price spikes this winter. We believe that no other supplier would recommend that you return to default servicing first, which saving you money is our business. Yeehaw. So, in other words, they can't do anything for us at this time, but they feel that in the not too distant future, with 21 months, that they can save us some money. We kind of always agreed that we actually paid them some money, didn't we? Well, we voted to participate.
We voted to participate. We voted to participate.
So we-
Because we're eliminating January, February, March.
So, I mean, my expertise in buying electricity is next to nothing, so.
I'm not sure.
I don't
At a
have-
point to go shopping anyway.
I don't have any expertise in buying it, I just have expertise in paying for it, right?
Can you?
So,
So
motion
we
to go ahead and, yeah, it's just what I just read to you. So we're
Does
going
it
to
have a title on it?
electricity supply contract, Hampshire Power.
And it's on the agenda.
Oh, okay. All right. Make a motion that we sign.
I'll second that.
Second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Only place for the chairman to sign. So. paper and only one place for me to sign.
Mhm.
That done?
Finished?
DEP Sustainable Materials Recovery Program Municipal Grant. Sign, it says on the agenda. It's a letter from the DEP. Congratulations. It is my pleasure to inform you that the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection has awarded the town of Ashfield a Sustainable Materials Recovery Program Municipal Grant. The town of Ashfield will receive up to $500 for a targeted small-scale initiative. The Sustainable Materials Recovery Program was created, and the Green Communities Act, which directs a portion of the proceeds from the sale of waste energy certificates to recycle programs approved by DEP. Composting, reuse, reduction, so there's a whole bunch of things that we do. Terms and conditions of your grant are outlined in the attached document, which contains key dates and deadlines specific to your award. Speaking to Tommy, he got this from Eric Weiss. This came through our co-op.
HRMC.
Have to get it signed. Now, return a signed original to DEP no later than February 1st. So we can't put it off too long, can we?
Does it have restrictions what we can use it for, or is it geared toward just certain things?
It doesn't. I haven't got that far. How's that?
I was just wondering, we've got the grant, and Tom got it to Eric Weiss. Who's going to spend the money and on what project? Because I would imagine you can't just let it.
Use of grant funds. Grant funds will be spent on one or more of the following pre-approved expenses: recycling, outreach, and educational materials.
And the cooperative does a lot of that, and hazardous materials.
And that's already checked off.
So in terms of recycling, I mean, is it the kind of thing where you can use the money to do a special half day gathering up some things that we never,
I have an idea.
hazardous material?
I have an idea that is that one day the hazardous material, household hazardous material.
So this would fall under perhaps Tom's setting up something special.
Yeah, I think it would be Eric, really.
Oh, Eric would say. Okay.
There's already a page here with my signature on it. Oh, that's my proof of authentication. Okay. So $500. Probably going to cost them $2,000 to administer the 500, but we'll take it anyway, right?
I make a motion that we sign,
I'll
receive
second.
the grant.
Second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Beautiful.
There's another one off. Letter of support for Franklin Conservation District.
And
That came in an email, didn't it?
it did, and I got a copy of a couple of emails, as well as the letter that you might sign in each of your folders.
The letter to Mandy Chestnut. Conservation programs.
You have that in your folder too. Yeah, all the letters.
So this is a letter, they're applying for $250,000 to do assessments and design engineering of sites in the Deerfield River watershed damaged by Irene. You're not asking for any money from the town,
Just support.
just support. So I'll look to you.
Okay,
Because I have absolutely no idea even where to start when I think of a fluvial geomorphologist.
my read on this, I actually talked to John Sears, Paul, who's a select board member there, and I know that they supported it, and that he supports it. And, you know, they got hammered on the Chickley River there, that whole situation there.
Right.
And so we are part of the Deerfield watershed. It makes sense that we support anyone that is doing a study to see the impact of that watershed on those local communities. So morphology means general conditions, physical, you know, soil, geology, that sort of thing. I think it's a good thing to show support in a general sense for this sort of thing, personally.
Okay, so the letter that Mary has for us here, the town of Ashfield gives its enthusiastic support for the Franklin Conservation District's project, creating resilient communities in the Deerfield River watershed, referenced above. Tropical storm Irene in August of 11 caused extensive flood and erosion damage to Ashfield. While some roads and other infrastructures were repaired immediately following the flood, many damaged sites remain and are prone to future flooding and erosion. To build stronger flood resiliency in our community, the most prone infrastructure must be identified, the cause for stream channel instability assessed, and projects designed, permitted, and implemented that will lead to long-term infrastructure protection and aquatic habitat improvement.
My only concern is that none of this would lead to thou shalt not use this part of the river because, you know, that's been fixed so the cows shouldn't walk down or the horse shouldn't walk in it. I wouldn't want to see it have any kind of restrictions in it that would prevent people who already use part of the stream.
I can't imagine that it would.
You know what I mean?
I mean, that'd be kind of crazy, but I think worse things have happened, you know.
To be honest, there's already other government agencies that regulate all that.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't want to see more.
I mean, if you, right.
So as long as that wasn't an outcome, but it's only a study,
Yeah.
so, right?
Yeah, and how far they're gonna get up the South River with 250,000 when you think about the whole Deerfield River.
And the whole watershed. I mean, and we're not even a major player in that, you know, it's Buckland, Warren, we do contribute to it, clearly.
But didn't Conway get quite a bit of damage down there?
Yeah,
I mean, they had to do repairs right away.
yeah.
And as you come up 116, I'm sure, and I don't know what they're gonna do with it, but there's a lot of debris and stuff
For sure.
that stayed, which makes nice fishing habitat now, but does it stay?
Oh, everybody's scared right to death if they put a chain and drove, towed some of that lumber out of the way, that they get in trouble.
It's a big deal. It's called debris management now. You know, the whole process, I've been to a couple seminars, and you can't just take that debris and put it on some field. You have to, it's a very complicated situation.
Well, how about just getting some of the big trees? You had a big tree and it fell into the brook, and everybody's scared to death to hitch onto it and pull it the hell up and put it in their fireplace.
Yeah. Well, that's half the problem with Smith Road, is those trees fell in and they took half the banking with them. You know, as they toppled in.
I mean, it's crazy as hell.
I think we should support this. I'll make a motion and get it on the table. I'll make a motion that the chair be authorized to sign this on behalf of our select board. And this is a letter of support dated January 27th to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation.
Second.
I certainly agree with you, if you can't tell, about this regulating.
We don't need more
Big
regulations.
up down to craziness. Like I told fellow today, I think it's a problem with having a full-time legislature. So they get in there and they start thinking they have to, they're lawmakers, so to justify their existence, they have to make another crazy law.
Give them more vacation.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
How we doing, Mary? I'm knocking them right off here.
That's fine, I don't have anything else for you to sign.
Oh dear.
All right, now let's get on to the personnel. I promise that we get on to the personnel policy. See how we make out on this.
You said Christopher is here, but he's in
He's
his
coming
meeting.
after. I think he should be a start.
And no, he's on his way at some point.
Missing an acronym.
So we're finally getting to sections 1 through 6. I'm on page 1, section 1 says introduction. Is there any notes or anybody have anything to offer on that section?
I had a couple of questions on it. I don't know the best way to do this, but just to jump in, I guess. Under section B, only the hiring authority is authorized to create an employment contract. To do this, a written signed agreement is required. The final interpretation provisions of the personnel policies and procedures is the exclusive responsibility of the select board. I'm fine with that up to there, but I underlined the rest of it. And the rest of it says, if a hiring authority wishes to negotiate a benefit beyond that permitted by the personnel policy and procedures, she should consult with the personnel board for its recommendation. And I have beside that a question relative to the budget process, because last year, I just remember there were a few things like stipends that we were dealing with, and I'm wondering, as much as I see the sense of order that this proposes, I'm nervous about encumbering the time of too many boards and stuff, making too many hoops to jump through. So in a case where we took a stipend and we went from 100 to 300, I guess we could have done it last year. We could have said, this is our recommendation. Do you want to kick it around and get back to us next week or something in the personnel board, But we didn't do that. We said, we took a vote and we talked to the finance committee and we said, let's do that. And then there was a subsequent meeting and we had one extra person that we wanted to bump up, maybe Wayne, I don't remember who it was at the time. But it just seems like this is too all-encompassing. And maybe it wasn't meant to be the way I'm thinking.
I think it's a benefit, not necessarily a salary/stipend. It's not trying to manage the dollars that you say we're bumping it from 100 to 300, but somebody said, we want that person to have an extra week's vacation.
Oh, that clear.
It's after a benefit as opposed to a salary.
So is there something, okay, it does say negotiate a benefit. It does say benefit.
Do you think it needs some clarification?
No, I don't think so. Maybe I read it too broadly.
Well, wait a minute, we started out talking about creating an employment contract. Right? That's out in section B. Only the hiring authority, which is the select board. Is that correct?
No.
It's the select board with a couple of exceptions, Board of Health,
Under D.
Board of Health employee and assessors for
Yeah,
Essex.
I've got those marked out,
And I think they're listed further in the manual.
To do this, a written and signed agreement as written,
Okay.
the final interpretation of the provisions is the exclusive responsibility of the select board. If a hiring authority wishes to negotiate a benefit beyond that permitted by the personnel policies and procedures,
And usually the recommendation would then come to the select board to vote it. Because the personnel board is not voting it, they're just gonna talk over, well, if you give one extra week to this. I mean, thinking of something that,
yeah, see, I had the same area marked
Oh,
out
did you?
because anything that says, should is kind of a fuzzy kind of deal. And let me throw this out, is that if a hiring authority wishes to negotiate a benefit beyond that permitted by the personnel policies and procedures, the authority must get prior approval of the select board.
Do we have the ability, like if the trustees of the library hire a janitor and want to give that janitor an extra week of vacation, can we weigh in on that? I thought that was out of our territory.
Well, I think,
Using
this
the
is
word
my,
must.
and I'm throwing it out there,
Yeah,
but I'm thinking the hiring authority, right, if they're hiring for the town of Ashfield, the hiring authority for town employee can do that within the mustard and the mayonnaise that's in this book, right, when it's done, within our policies and procedures. Anything outside of that must be approved by the Board of Selectmen. That's what I'm saying.
I would have thought just because they can hire someone doesn't mean they can craft their own benefits.
okay.
Right. When that's,
It's what's in the book, but if they've got something they're trying to do, the problem you get into, I think the reason somebody's got to approve it, you then have to fairly distribute it through all employees or you have a problem. So people can't just,
yeah, it's never the rule that's gonna cause the problem. It's always the exception to the rule.
So let me ask you a simple question. Does an employee of the library have the same benefits as an employee of the town hall? Is that a yes? I'm asking out of ignorance.
as far as I know, that's the
Yes.
case. Do you have any reason to believe there's something different from past?
No, I think that is the same.
Okay.
Otherwise, you've got some interesting issues because they're all coming out of the same payroll
I mean,
town.
with the way that I would phrase that, it would make it the responsibility of the select board. There would definitely be a board responsible if anything was different than. And since in that previous package, when it talked about the hiring authority, it talks about the responsibilities of the select board, right? Our final interpretations and so forth are the rule.
My only thought about tying the personnel board into it is because they're the ones who have the control of this. I mean, ultimately, we have control of the personnel policies, and everyone understands that, but when it comes down to it, trying to keep a consistent manual, if some select board 10 years from now gave someone an extra week of vacation and it didn't get properly documented, it's not always the select board that, because
Yeah, but it needs to be.
it needs to be the select board, but the select board needs to then say, let's get it in black and white and make a uniform change or something like that.
Unless there was an exception for some
Some
reason that
position.
they felt that they could stand on.
Yeah. I'm okay with
I mean,
that.
are we trying to read more into it than what you think when it was drafted, Paul? You were there.
I was just thinking, maybe what you said, the two should, he, she, instead of should, shall consult with personnel supervisors and the hiring authority must get prior approval of the select board. they come before the board and say, we'd like to explore this, blah, 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 and then
Select board could send it to the personnel board for
Right.
a recommendation.
review this, what does it mean to the town to do this? What's it gonna cost? What-
I'm okay with
You know,
that.
so that's, I think
Something
that's
like
where
that.
I was going with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So how
I mean, I didn't write it down, but I would just change, if a hiring authority wishes to negotiate a benefit beyond that permitted by the personnel policies and procedures, the hiring authority must have prior approval of the select board.
Now, okay, so that leaves it in the hands of the select board. If it was something simple, they say yes. If it's something bigger, they can hand it over to the personnel board to review for a recommendation.
I think out of courtesy, they should include the personnel board, but it doesn't have to be written down necessarily. I mean, otherwise, you're gonna get some deviations from this, and it's just gonna go towards anarchy at some point. So from a standards point of view, I think I'm okay with the way you've worded it, but if something came before this board and I'm sitting on it, I'd say, yeah, it sounds like a reasonable thing. Let's get it into the policy manual. If it needs to go in the policy manual.
Mhm.
But, you know, you could have a hiring authority, right, one of these other
Right.
hiring authorities, and there could be a change made if the way it's worded now.
Without
They could go to
personnel
the personnel board, and the personnel board says, well, that's okay, and then they just do it, and it's different, and the select board wouldn't have any.
That's a good point.
I don't think it was meant to be that way, that's why it says recommendation.
Well, that's why we're reviewing it, right?
Because the recommendation, the personnel board doesn't put anything in place, but they give the select board, here it is, and do you agree with it or not? Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
so the he, she should consult with the personnel board.
I
Is being replaced with that
I think it should
other
be,
part.
I think it should be, the hiring authority must have prior approval of the select board.
I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mark up my copy of the manual to
Yeah.
then share with the personnel board, because
Then get there.
ultimately, we've got to make all the changes that we agree to, and then off to town council.
The question I have for you, Paulette, as we start this, is kind of a document management question.
Yeah,
On the bottom of every page, it says approved by the select board. Let's say 5 years down the road, we make a change somewhere. It would be nice if a back page or something said revisions and said what was changed in the document. It might just be a typo, and this
Yep.
date would change always on the bottom of the page, but that way we could say, oh yeah, back in June, the change related to the weeks of vacation or
It's a
something.
list of revisions
Yeah.
that you can add.
A list of revisions.
Okay,
So
all right.
these changes that we're making as we move through as we get done, maybe we could just vote once that we agree to those. You want to do that, or?
Yes, because we'll wait till we've got everything. We're not going to send you back another copy.
No, but I'm just saying, tonight,
Yes.
we can say, these are the changes, and we can say, this is what we'd like to send back, and,
I agree. You don't want to.
Can we keep it general, because the minutes will be impossible to keep here tonight with the detail that you're going into.
Right, and I'm going to see all of your discussion going into the minutes, but I will keep a marked up copy according to what you're saying, and that can go.
Maybe
into the file.
generally just say associated with B,
Yeah.
issue. Does that sound okay?
Mhm.
Otherwise, we're going to,
Oh, they'll be incredibly long. Because this is basically, sort of, it's a draft copy for the select boards to,
if you guys are in agreement with it, I'm all right with
I'm
it.
writing
It's
on my
not
copy.
being too long.
good.
All right, C. I just kind of wonder why it's there. I mean, I'm sure it has this manual summarizes the current benefits maintained by the town. If questions of interpretation arise of this plan, the answers will be determined by reference to the actual documents, policies, or governing statutes
got state laws and federal laws and all kinds of things
That are changing all the time.
Yeah,
that you, even if you put a copy in, you wouldn't want to say, well, it's what it's in the manual, it's going to be what the law is.
this one, it seemed okay to me, personally.
Okay, we're in section 2 already. Select board is responsible.
I had a question on B3. Am I jumping ahead of you, Tom?
Well, no, because I have a mark on B3, just because I think it's repetitive between town clerk and town treasurer.
Yeah. I thought it was with the town treasurer, not the town clerk, but
That's right. With,
I mean, I'm all for checks and balances on money and stuff.
Town clerk says she does not have this.
she said she doesn't, okay. If she said she doesn't, I thought we saw it in the old prior manual, which is probably good.
And it's possible it was there and it's just not right.
Okay, so it's just
I mean,
to the
it's-
town treasurer.
Can we kind of agree that the town treasurer sounds like that would be the depository for all the employment records?
yeah, my concern was security of those records. I didn't want them in 2 places, so I prefer just one place, and it made sense that it be the treasurer.
So to the town treasurer as soon as possible, right?
Yep.
Instead of striking to the town clerk.
And the town clerk's maybe not responsible. Is there anything we're overlooking in case of, I don't know, we close town hall for business? Is that the town clerk's responsibility? So trying to reach employees? Just to make
I
sure
don't
we
know
miss-
enough to answer
didn't miss a
that.
piece. Okay.
No, town clerk. Town clerk, actually, in this town, the town clerk would have to be one notified. This town clerk is an elected official, right? Town clerk is a municipal employee. Okay. C, general responsibilities. It says, and just because I get sticky on should and shall and may, should it be the personnel board shall assist the select board or may assist the select board?
I say may, makes sense.
C, section 2, C,
Bottom
personnel
page.
board. The personnel board says the personnel board shall assist the select board in describing the duties and responsibilities of all municipal positions, proposing and reviewing working conditions and fringe benefits. And I didn't know if it should be may. If it shall, it would mean every time we want to hire a janitor to sweep the floor, that we would have to go to the personnel board. But
Not really.
may,
Because you'd have your job descriptions and all of that. I think it's trying to tie to the bylaw of the town, where it describes what the personnel board is supposed to do.
Yeah, I didn't know.
yeah, I mean, it's just, when it says shall, it would mean every time we did anything and filled a position. I mean, right now, we have a position with Betty LaSure helping in the police department that we don't have, we haven't gone to the personnel board for a finite description, but we're employing, so that's the difference, I think, between may and shall.
I interpreted that as every time you look at a position description, they've assisted us in one way. I don't see it as a door you have to go through. You know,
Well, shall means it is a door you have to go through.
But
That
the personnel board shall assist the board, the select board, just by doing the job, the position description, they already have assisted us. You know, it's not like every time you want to do something, you have to go through the personnel board. I didn't interpret it that way.
Paulette, what did you think on it? I mean, do you see a difference there, or is it, am I finding a difference with no distinction?
I think, in my mind, the shall doesn't make it mandatory. But it's, if you make it may, you could end up in a situation where you don't make use of the first health word. The assistant.
Here's the, did you find your bylaws?
Shall is used throughout the old ones. I mean, every paragraph, they shall, they shall.
Right. So we
Okay. There
didn't
shall be established.
try to reinvent the wheel, just to reorganize it. In fact, update anything that's really outdated.
It shall be registered voters. The board shall maintain a personnel handbook. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. It was just stuck out to me when it's. Any other? In C, are we moving on to D?
I noticed that number 6 in D was a new one from the previous handbook, huh?
The Board of Health shall appoint health agents.
Just noticed it.
It's true.
And then I added a number 7.
Did you add police department?
I did.
Okay, because this came up when we were talking about police, so I did that.
I said other than chief, which needs to come here.
I think there was discussion about that, and I believe it wasn't put in, but I'll double check. Because she is a strong chief by virtue of the town.
Town voted that.
Right. So, did it need to be repeated when it's a strong chief, where these were all sort of exceptions? But if you want it in there, it's easy enough to put it in there to make sure it's concise.
I think it belongs in there. It can come out if we ever change it to a weak chief.
Sure.
You know, it just makes sense. It's a dynamic document. We change it as we change.
So the police chief,
I would, no, I just say
And
police.
I think all of our police chiefs have come to the select board.
As a
anyway.
courtesy, yes.
Right.
So the hiring authority is the police department, police chief, maybe, or something.
say again, Ron?
No, in all cases, you're saying the authority for appointment with the following exceptions.
Yeah.
And so, like you have the Board of Health, so it would be the police department, or, you know, they take care of their own deal there, under the supervision of the police chief or something like that.
Would we expand on that for the police department just a little bit and just put the, you know, put under MGL, whatever the number is for the strong chief? That would be a
Find
little
out
more,
what it is.
that would be,
Yep.
be more descriptive, right? I mean, it would eliminate that questioning.
Makes it more specific, which is good. So we need to just get, okay.
So my little note that I had, are you researching?
Well, I have it right here. I just have all that a little bit. Under Strong Police Chief Statute, GLC 41, Section 97A. If you just want something to start at, I don't know if it's the same one.
41 section, what was that number again?
41, Section 97A,
Okay.
and then a weak police was under 97.
Strong.
According to this, I don't know if that's true.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, under D, I made a little note because we went through all this about authority for appointment. And I just made a note, what about authority for termination? But so much of that's controlled by labor laws and so forth.
Do very carefully. Do it very carefully. Yeah.
Should it say authority for appointment or termination? Or not really?
I think the termination, you gotta be careful. We might,
Oh, I think you gotta be more careful hiring an employee than you do getting married today.
authority for,
I'm okay with it just as it is. I mean, it's saying who the authority
I
is.
was just wondering
Yeah.
on termination, you know, I mean,
there are sections in here, I think, on termination.
Yeah.
okay. They're probably further than I read.
Right. So it's sort of starting out as an overview, but I know they're in there. But that
But I-
doesn't mean we couldn't have something here.
I remember vividly that 3 sewer commissioners had to come to the Board of Selectmen to get an employee terminated. And that was not a good night.
No, you do want to be
The outcome was fine, but it
Careful.
wasn't.
because the ramifications are to the town, not to the
Board.
department that did the termination, so.
I just had that note, I just wanted to bring it up, so we were thinking of it. Doesn't mean we can't come back to it later if it is.
No,
an
I
issue.
made a note.
How about section 3, definitions?
I had a few things. I was wondering, I can see the sense in doing employee new, employee temporary, but I want to, the common sense thing in my mind, if I'm an employee reading this, wouldn't it make more sense to say new employee, temporary employee? I mean, from our
Just to
time.
change that around.
Yeah, in all cases, benefited position, non-benefited position. And the reason that they're in this order is because they're in alphabetical. And
Exactly,
if
that's
they-
why it was done that way.
Yeah,
Right.
but then throughout the manual, every time you want to talk about a employee new, it's not new employee, it's an employee new. I guess that's okay if you guys are comfortable with that, but
Well, we're trying to keep like items together.
it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, new employee would be somewhere else than temporary
Right,
employee.
and so you might not see that you should have turned the page.
Yeah.
So that was the rationale for it.
Okay. What I did under A is, after employee new, is I put the following sentence, any newly employed person. I just thought it needed that sentence before, for the purpose of calculating benefits. You see what I'm saying?
Any,
Newly employed person. I mean, it just made sense that something be said what that is. And then go on just as you have it for the purpose of calculating benefits. And I had no issue with those words. I just thought that the first sentence should be very short and sweet, any newly employed person. It can be other words too, just.
I'm sorry, I lost you there for just a second, I think I was on
Okay.
a track of thought. Where were you?
Under
new
A,
employee?
New
Yeah.
employee, I had the very first sentence before the words for the purpose of calculating.
Yep.
Any newly employed person, because that's what employee
any
new is.
description.
It's a description it's a definition. than just jumping into how you calculate benefits.
Yeah.
The first sentence should say that. Because in the second one, you say, any employee, temporary one, any employee who is employed on a seasonal basis. So I understand right away what it is. Want me to just keep going?
Go.
On those? E, I had a position that has a regular weekly schedule of 20 hours or more, and then I had an insert right after that, and I said, and is not a new employee or non-benefited position. And I saw sense in that when I did it. So this is a position benefited, a position that's a
You
regular...
can get back to that spot, Ron, because I don't...
Okay, a position that has a regular weekly schedule of 20 hours or more, period. No,
Oh.
and is not a new employee or a non-benefited position.
What does the new employee have to do with it? That I-
Well, the new employee doesn't get benefits through the probation period, is that right? So you have to kind of separate
okay.
them a little bit.
You know what I think's going on here? I mean, when we get further in,
Yeah?
some of that detail is in there. I think they're just trying to
Am I wrong?
describe.
Okay.
No, you're not necessarily wrong. It's trying to just describe a term. If you think it's not complete enough, that's fine. But then later on, so when it starts talking about, a benefited position and goes into more detail. It's hard to put all the detail in the definition.
A new employee, even though they're in a probationary status, would still be benefited. They would still have health insurance available to them. They would still have holidays available to them.
But how about a non-benefited employee then, a seasonal one who doesn't get benefits?
If you didn't, further on in the manual, describe if you didn't make your probation, you're not entitled
Yeah.
to get paid for a whole bunch of
Vacation time.
benefits, vacation time, stuff like that. If you continue, everything is fine.
So that's why I did this insert at this point, because a benefited person is the person who does get the benefits and is not a seasonal worker
Right,
or a new employee. If that's, I'm not saying I agree with that, I'm just saying you need to, in my mind, it's a person who gets benefits.
But this is talking about a position,
Right.
and so somebody would be hired to the position, which is a benefited position, although they may be in a probationary period.
Right, and there is more on that further in. Do you want me to put something here, and then when we get to that section, it may be...
I guess so. I mean, I'm just thinking, here's a letter of offer going out to someone who's working 30 hours a week as a seasonal employee. Someone has to say, this position is a non-benefited position, right? Because and under position benefited, it says a position that has a weekly schedule of 20 hours or more, period. So it's not true that it's just 20 hours or more. It's 20 hours or more as a benefited position, because you could be a seasonal employee and have 20 hours or more and not get benefits, right?
Yeah, you'd be under temporary employee.
Or you'd be under a position called non-benefited.
Mhm.
So by putting the period after that, I'm not trying to nitpick, I'm just saying,
No, I'm trying to follow.
we're defining position benefited. So if someone's, an employee's reading this and they're saying, a position that has a regular weekly schedule of 20 hours or more. Well, that's me. It didn't say in my letter of employment, but every day in the summer, I'm doing these 30 hours a week, cutting grass or doing something like that. And I'm going to have an issue with the town now because someone forgot to say this is a non-benefited position in my letter of offer. So I just thought that a benefited one should be a little bit more detailed that way. And that's why I offered. So I mean,
Okay, and is not a new employee,
or a non-benefited position. And just bring it up and see what they say. And then right after that, I said, an employee in a benefited position is eligible for prorated benefits. And I put parentheses,
mhm,
and I said, of 40 hours, because usually when you say prorate, you gotta say, what's it prorated of? So I assume if someone works 20 hours, a 40-hour position might get a couple weeks vacation, then a 20-hour job would get half that, is that right? I don't know.
And there's a formula in there that was worked on long and hard, because it prorates, you're right, it prorates to the hours.
Based on 40 hours or 45?
If you were working a 20-hour work week, and the day's a holiday, you don't get 8 hours pay.
You get 4.
You get the prorated of your work week.
But what would you get if you got the full 8 hours? Is it a 40-hour week or a 45-hour week? Do you
I think
remember?
we're geared towards 40 hours.
Right.
I think because the highway department's.
So that's why I said in parentheses, you know, of 40 hours or based on 40 hours, or see prorated section on page so-and-so, you know, so that they understood what it was a function of.
Yep.
And I had under definitions a few more quick questions. I had disability, question mark, it's just a question mark.
Where are you?
Under definitions.
Oh,
There's nothing on disability?
No, I'm sorry. I'm not being specific enough. Under your new employee, you said, and it caught my eye, for the purpose of calculating benefits, an employee who left the employ of the town for a period exceeding 60 consecutive days and who is subsequently re-employed by the town shall be considered a new employee. And I thought of the exceptions, Paulette. If someone had FMLA and was away for 6 months for pregnancy or something, or 3 months, I think FMLA is 120 days or something, then you'd have a discrimination case on your hands for sure that way. So there have to be exceptions to that, I think, that because you have to guarantee.
But FMLA is still, you're still an employee.
Right, you might not
Not
get paid.
working.
Right, but you can't, your benefits are supposed to be,
And
you
there's-
can't start them over, you know, like they're a new employee.
No. But
and they're, I'm looking to see where they are, but I know there are details for that at the end, Family Medical Leave Act and Small Necessities.
I
Act.
saw that.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm just saying here, there are a few exceptions in my mind, and maybe you say with the exception of disability, because, you know, someone gets hurt on the job, so you can't start them over as a new employee just because they're approved.
Which one is he on?
I'm on A.
A still? Okay.
So, because you're treating a full-time employee who might have been working for us for 10 years, not you, but the book, I'm saying,
Right.
they say that if you've gone for 60 consecutive days, we're going to consider you a new employee. That's not really true. It's not fair. For them, I don't want them to get mad because
And I wonder if we note, if maybe all we need is something that says noting exceptions.
Yeah,
further in the
exceptions.
manual. Yeah.
Absolutely, and so I'm just giving you what those exceptions are in my mind.
Yeah,
FMLA,
okay.
disability, and approved letter, leave of absence. There could be a situation where someone needs to take care of someone and it's
Right.
not FMLA, but the select board says, geez, we'd love to have you come back to us in 6 months or something, and it's an approved.
I'm
We
glad
can
you're
reference
bringing
those
that up.
other chapters.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
I'm glad
Yep.
you're bringing it up. I mean, we're going through definitions, so you're defining it. I mean, what I was thinking of, well, if they haven't been terminated,
Yeah,
and if they're not here for 60 days, as long as they haven't been terminated, they come back just where they left off.
This is good, because everybody reads it just a little different.
well, that's why we're doing it.
Yeah,
I mean, so-
yeah.
I think I'm almost done, and I'll be quiet. Under I thought there was a place for you to put supervisors. It may be a J, and to define who the supervisors in the town are. It's obvious if you go to the highway department, but if you come to the town hall, I'd have to pause and think about it. You know, everyone should have a supervisor, right? In a way. I mean,
And
you
in the job descriptions, I think, is where you find it.
yeah.
Like, the job description in the work for Lynn references that her supervisor is the town clerk. I'm assuming, I haven't looked at it recently, but the job descriptions.
Each
At
job
the highway
description will say who the
department.
supervisor is.
Right.
There'll be a section that'll say who you report to.
And if it doesn't have a specific, I think it'll, you know, and if it's not in the exception, like the police department, fire department, then it's the select board.
But if we had at least something in there that said supervisors, and said something like, please see position description, and if none is stated, select board. So that, because throughout this, you use the word supervisors,
Yep.
and I keep saying to myself, who are the supervisors? You know, I mean, I know the obvious ones, but I don't know all of them.
As stated in job descriptions.
Yeah, and if none stated, it's the select board.
Right.
And that was it I had on that section.
Just
Okay.
a side note on that is that people that you have as supervisors really need to be doing the performance appraisal of those that are on, that they supervise.
Yeah. That's why I thought it was good to define it here.
Yep.
Too.
And they may not do those performance evaluations all by themselves. I mean,
Right.
there may be a select board member or somebody there, but I think they need to do those.
I agree.
Anything else that you had in that section, Paulette?
I don't have any changes since I'm looking to you two to see things we missed.
No, but I didn't know if that our discussion had.
Oh, no, I'm fine. I understand what you mean now.
All right, section 4, personnel records.
I have more of the same on, whenever there's two people should establish personnel records, I have an issue with that because I'm afraid of the redundancy and the ambiguity. So I crossed out select board in both A and C, and it's in keeping with my mentality that the treasurer should be the one with the locked cabinet and the locked doors, and not the select board.
And maintain those files.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just nervous about it.
That is the way it's working now,
It is.
that it's the treasurer who maintains the
So-
personnel.
But don't I recall in the past there were some personnel records that were kept separate, locked in the vault?
Executive session?
Because when you get into things like that, that's okay, or anything that has to do with any kind of reprimand or any of that, I don't think it goes into the files of the treasurer.
Well, there are two,
So it may need to be annotated.
there are two separate files per employee, so that some things can be segregated.
Right, and that may
But
be.
those all stay in the treasurer's locked doors.
But I think there are things, if you had an executive session about personnel and stuff, that does not go.
Well, that would go in
Right.
the vault of their executive session.
And who maintains that?
I would maintain it with the select.
See, I think that's where it's saying the select board treasurer.
But those aren't records,
As
that's,
required by law.
Right,
Is
those-
the part for the select board.
but the executive session would be minutes, there might be discussion in it, but it's not personnel records.
But is it personnel information?
It's part of.
There might be personnel information in an open meeting or a closed meeting.
If you were bringing an employee in for not doing their job well, or reprimand or whatever, and it's being done by the select board, they have the right to the executive session and all of that, and that is part of your personnel record. It's just that it's kept under lock and key by virtue of the executive session. Nobody's going to offhand reprimand that's just being written on a note to the treasurer. Because it said required by law, I would think that has to do with the minutes and executive session and all of that, without enumerating.
I mean, the difference between private and public sector is whenever there's an issue like that, it goes into the personnel file. and it's there. But this executive session kind of changes the location of some of this repository.
But if it involved a personnel matter, it seems to me that in an executive session, the select board might direct that something become part of the personnel file, and then that would become part of the personnel file. The executive session minutes, to the extent that they could never be opened up, would stay in the vault. And to the extent that they were opened up, would then go in the book. So I think
Executive
it's different
session
from what would go into the personnel file.
I don't think this means that the select board has to maintain a separate set of records. I think it's just trying to get at the fact that it's executive session, select board issue, and not everything that's there goes to the treasurer.
So why don't we stay there?
But I think that's what they put as required by law, so you didn't have to put all the fine print.
Yeah.
But
I think,
we can
I think you're all right, but I think as a matter of practice, what would happen is if you had an employee that you had to take in for, go under executive session for a complaint,
Yeah.
and the executive session would be to talk it out, get the facts, and make a decision. If the decision had to do with the employee or with behavior, would that stay in executive session? I mean, if there was a letter that you were actually sending to the employee, you would be coming out of executive session at that
Let
point.
me give you an example of one that could be sticky. You get a lawsuit from the employee. Anything in the employee's file, I believe, they're able to ask for and look at their personal file. Whereas if you're protecting the town from that suit, you want it separated. You want it in an executive session file in the vault, not accessible in the employee's personal file. I think. I'm just saying that's a different
if
situation.
you look and see, maybe we have done things in the past, and Donna can help us a little that we're not supposed to do. The employment application is not for public distribution to another employee, which is the treasurer. So we may have been doing things, if we've been doing that we need to be separate.
Good point.
Well, wouldn't it have to be maintained by an employee one way or another?
Not,
Whether
Does
it's the
not-
select board's employee or the treasurer?
if the select board was maintaining the file, it would be one of the members of the select board. Because otherwise you're asking an employee to do it, which is exactly what you're trying not to do.
Boy, I don't
see.
I understand in today's atmosphere how we might have that, but I can't believe that anybody would volunteer to run for select board if they thought they had, we're not carrying around the nuclear football, but would we have to carry around everybody's applications in a briefcase?
The select board is the HR department of the town. The treasurer is not the HR department.
Well, see,
And you've got to separate these two out because you can't have another personnel member reading all of your performance evaluations. Oh, did you see Joe? Not that our treasurer would do that, but you've got to separate those. That's
Well, I
why
wonder
companies have
if
HR.
that isn't what we need to do if we decide that the treasurer is going to keep track of all of this, that that person is the HR department.
Part of their job.
They have all that information to execute their duties. They have to know their birthday. They have to know their social security number. They have to know their maiden name. They have to know how many kids they have. They have to know where they live.
So maybe have it in two places.
That's different than what's cited. And I think probably on some of this, we need actually Donna's help to make sure that we're not going astray in that regard. Because the
I get
treasurer
that.
collector is entirely different than HR in my mind. And if you want to carve it out that way, that's a whole different responsibility when you look at the items in number C. we wouldn't have that for sort of co-employee.
You understand what I'm saying, that the treasurer is doing that now.
Not entirely, hopefully.
See, I think the difference I have
Not
with you, Tom,
disciplinary
is that the
records.
treasurer has personnel information,
Right.
personal information, personnel.
Right.
Whereas the HR department, it's not one of their responsibilities. The treasurer is not the person who's responsible for hiring, firing, doing job reviews, and having access to all those files, those review files and such. They're usually in a completely different place. Like in a company, our business manager or our accountant would have all the social security numbers and everything you're talking about. But she can't just gain access to an employee's file and look at reprimands and things like that, unless it's part of her position description in that case. So we do need to find those position descriptions and find out where they're supposed to sit.
And this book is basically saying we are HR. I mean, this section we're looking at right now that says you keep all these other things, that's what the select board keep, is saying that the select board is the HR department. And the treasurer is the payroll department.
Right, which has
Which is what
personal
you're-
information.
Personally, you must give the social security number to get a paycheck.
Right.
And children are related to something, or whatever else you need to do those processes.
I'd love to know what Donna would say today if we asked her what most municipalities do. Where do they sit?
In terms of big ones or small ones?
Yeah.
No.
Be an interesting question.
Well, I went to a STAM meeting, a small
Yeah.
town administrators meeting. It was close to Worcester, Alders, and can't remember. And there was a whole section discussing personnel records and private information and so forth. And I can pull out my notes from that session. There's an HR specialist who was talking. But I believe I remember that one of the things she said is you have to have these all in one place. You shouldn't have personnel files of different sorts in different areas. But I will see if there's anything I can
But I
do.
think the personnel files that we have traditionally had, that the treasurer has,
But
has to do with the financials.
right, but this was
of
talking
payroll.
about everything. It was talking about complaints. It was talking about, she asked for a show of hands in the room. It was mostly with the treasurer, probably.
Sure.
Because the treasurer has a lot of that already, and what they were counseling is you don't want it spread out. But
I don't know, as far as maintaining the file, I would think that someone who historically was in the position for a longer term, certainly the responsibility for managing the employees and so forth would be the select board or the hiring authority, but to maintain those files, I don't think to put it in the hands of a board that potentially every 12 months changes.
When you, I just know there's a difference.
But I think after all this discussion, I think what you just came up with is that Donna really needs to give us some guidance on that.
I agree.
Yes, because I have concerns whether you're going to have an HR person or however you want to describe it, because you could conceivably have information in there.
I'm convinced we have an HR person, they just don't know who they are yet.
Right now, they're sitting here.
All right, so we move forward from there, so we'll go to Donna with some of that.
Sounds
Can
good to
you
me.
go- Mary, can you shoot off an email?
Do you want to do that separate, or do you want to wait and let her, when she critiques this whole thing? Or, because it's all going back to her eventually, instead of getting it piecemeal.
if it's all right if I send an email and take a look at any references I have.
But out of context from the book, I think it's difficult, that's all. You don't want to piecemeal her answers, and then when it all comes back together, she goes, oh, and it changes.
But it sounds like this might be something we want an answer to before we do the whole long process, just to have a sense of where we're going with that.
I think out of respect to the personnel board, that this is their baby. Let them do it, and
I
we don't
want-
have to accept it. but
I want
we
to
should-
put a note here to make sure, add a note to this, needs input, who is the HR person? Because we really don't.
Well, I think
have-
from our standpoint, I would just shoot down an email and ask her what other communities do, or what her recommendation is on who should maintain her fund.
Well, why can't Paulette do that as a select board member rather than
Well,
just?
that's fine.
I'm not, besides that,
I could cut and paste this section and send it to her.
But
and
it's
ask
not
her
like we're not
advice.
gonna come back to this
Oh,
again.
for sure. Or
You know,
change it. in
When we
future.
get through the next, how many sections? All right, we're
How
gonna
about-
get through the first 6 tonight.
Personnel board is meeting on Thursday. How about if we send it to Donna from the personnel board? Doesn't have to be just me, but, the board's working long and hard on it, so it can come from. To
That's
clarify,
Do you have a problem with
is the
that?
select
fine
board
with
really HR or is somebody else?
I think if you divide up these responsibilities, it's going to get very confusing very fast. Let's just keep it between the two boards and we'll make the ultimate decision.
Oh, sure. No, I wasn't trying to split it up. I was just saying that we could take the lead and have some idea of where we wanted it to go before it went back to the personnel board. That was the only reason I was.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? So we're gonna revisit C. How about D?
Well, they're all related under personnel records, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because number D is striking at the core. My question is, an employee shall have access to review his or her personnel file, which I know that to be the case. An appointment or written request should be made to the town treasurer. So that assumes that the town treasurer has control of personnel files, HR files. So if that's going to be the case, then we just need to add that to the position description. I didn't have any other changes in that section.
And if C were actually in place, then D
Yeah.
would have and, because you want to see that other file.
Right.
Right, okay.
Under E, it says about file, the employee's file without written authorization from that employee except to verify employment. Doesn't, before you verify to anybody else employment, don't you have to have a written authorization to do that also?
I don't think so. Just to say, yes, they worked here. Somebody calls the so-and-so work for you. Because maybe not as much for the town, but you can get calls from other agencies to verify employment. What about like unemployment? They check.
You're supposed to sign if you're supposed to sign to allow information out if you're taking a mortgage so the bank can verify your employment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that situation. So you're saying if someone wants to verify your employment situation, that you have to give permission for them to do so?
Oh, good question. Maybe that's what it says, or as required by law. But, except, needs clarification.
Yeah, limited internal access to personnel that those who We ready to move on to section 5? We're only going through section 6, so we're beating it down here.
I had questions on posted hours definition. I said, in our handbook, we have what are posted hours, for the company. And I know that in every place they're a little bit different, but in our town it's different that way. But since you use that word so often, Paul, does that need to be defined?
Posted work hours?
Yeah, or posted hours you use in the first sentence. I mean, as an employee, if I was an employee here, I'd say, okay, work off-site, an employee must be present at his or her assigned place of work during posted hours. So I'm gonna say, okay, where are the posted hours for me in the highway department? Where are they for me, just to be able to look, because they're
Yep.
supposed to be posted, right?
I didn't note of that.
And theoretically, someone controls those posted hours, so.
So in that same, after
Town
post,
hall, highway.
Whoever has,
What about police department, fire department? Because they manage their own, do we have to state them? I mean, they have work schedules, so that work schedule is with the police department. Not so the fire department, so most of that's.
but if you were to come to the police department, would you expect that somewhere on the door or somewhere, it say,
training hours.
training hours or regularly held police
Yep.
on the website or something? I mean,
Yep.
people need to know. And maybe that definition is posted by each responsible supervisor or each department.
So if an employee is not present during his or her regularly posted hours, and we'll define posted hours, right? Then she will need, shall, must, will take it as vacation, sick, or personal day. I mean, those are all compensated days, right? A person misses a day and they say, well, I don't want to take it from my vacation time, it's just a missed day. So they may take it as one of those other days, or they shall take it as one of those days.
To be paid, they would have to take it as one of those days.
If they were
To be
salary,
compensated.
if they were salary, right? If they were hourly,
Well, if you were hourly and
You
you were
just
gonna
don't
miss
put
a
the
day, you could not get paid.
Right.
Or, and that's also assuming it's a benefited position,
Right.
then you could take one of those other days if you want to get paid for it.
If it's a salaried position, you can always make that up. You know, if you get the work done, you can get that. You know, especially if you're exempt,
yeah.
right? But, you know.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Huh?
I see your point.
Then she may need to take it as vacation.
Or shall coordinate with their supervisor to make it up, or the rest of that sentence, right? Something.
Well, I don't know if I'd make it that flexible, but I am wondering, do they take the day and does it automatically get charged as a benefited day, or so they don't have a benefited day someday when they want it, or do they?
You need to be careful. I mean, I'm salaried at work, but if I chose not to show up this Wednesday, they don't expect me to say, oh yeah, I'll work a few extra hours on Thursday and Friday, forget that.
And if you show up an hour late, you don't expect someone to say, well, you're gonna make it up. You just make it up, or you
Right.
you take care of it.
But if I miss a whole day,
Mhm.
it's something.
No,
True.
again, I'm not arguing, and I don't think this has to do with an exempt employee, a salaried exempt employee. I think it has to do with somebody that comes in and they're expected to be there during posted hours, and they don't show up.
But I think that's true of salaried employees too. It's about,
Nowhere
most of the employees that are here are going to be doing something like saying, oh, I'm taking a sick day, I'm taking a personal. That's what you expect to happen. This is stating, you just blew off the day, you've got to account for it, and it's not just, oh, I thought I'd sleep in today, so I'm a no-show. That's really what that's trying to get at.
Yeah, but are you going to reward them by paying for the day if they don't show up? That's what I'm asking.
Only if they use up one of their benefits. They don't have the luxury of saying, oh, well, I'll just work more hours another day.
I just wonder if will need, or, I mean, if that's the way it's intended, should it be shall?
Yeah, perhaps. Shall take it as a vacation or sick.
Okay,
Or, what's wrong with adding to that, or work out some other arrangement with their supervisor? Is that too loosey-goosey?
It's too loosey-goosey for me.
Yeah, but it doesn't give them the option to do that. You're saying, allow it to happen, but just don't state it here. What if someone has some crazy reason for not showing up for 4 hours, and they go to their supervisor and they say, I'll take care of it, don't worry, I'll work an extra 4 hours or something like that. Do you want that supervisor to say that's not an option, you have to take it as a vacation day?
I tell my people I don't want to know everything.
Exactly.
and it's saying is not present during his or her regularly posted hours, so it's talking really not about that 1 or 2 hours you're late because you broke a tooth and you're at the dentist's office and now I'm back. It's, the whole day is just gone and you have no clue what they were doing.
So
I mean, you know,
but
you prefer
you understand?
shall.
Well, I'm just wondering what the direction is, what's trying to be stated. If you've got a policy, you know, if you come in, if you're supposed to be here at 9 and you break a tooth and you're at the dentist, is it automatic that you're going to get charged 2 hours of vacation time? Or is it up to the employee to, I mean, I'm not really worried about the broken tooth, I'm just worried about putting something in the file if you got an employee that isn't quite what you're looking for.
Right.
Right? Because that's, unfortunately, the way the laws and the regulations all are, you have to have a system that addresses that.
Right. And this is getting at, I believe, a whole day.
Well, Paulette, if that's the case, can we change it to say if an employee is not present during his her regularly scheduled workday, then she shall take it as a vacation? You know, rather than say their regularly posted hours, say regularly scheduled workday. Just gets us a little closer there, maybe.
Yes.
And then let them worry about the bits and pieces on their own. And they
Instead
shall.
of posted hours, yeah. I got you.
You get the gist of it.
Yes, I do.
And then I did have a question on 2, where you need the express authorization of the select board. I'm not sure we want to, I know that ultimately the responsibility is ours, but do we really want to be micromanaging at that level?
Only to the extent that you are the hiring authority.
Yeah. But they have supervisors, right?
Right. And then in many cases, we defer to the employees. They talk amongst themselves, like I think in town hall, so you all are coordinating, but we're aware of what's going on, I suspect, and it's not that we're saying, oh, yes, you may do that, and they manage, but you probably really have to have something in writing, what you're supposed to do.
I would think authorization of the hiring authority.
So, or hiring authority?
Yeah,
Hiring authority or supervisor.
yeah,
How's that?
that works for me.
Okay.
Because we just went through a whole long list
Right.
of hiring authorities beyond the select board.
Yep. So, select board, the hiring authority, or supervisor.
Are we ready?
In B?
I'm sorry?
Are we in B, inclement weather conditions?
Yeah, let's go.
Are we done yet?
I'm done with
It looks pretty straightforward to me. I didn't see anything big in B, but.
A. My only question in B was under 3. And I saw it for the first time, you using department heads / supervisors, and I'm just trying to stay consistent, you know? So
Yeah,
let's call them
that, we got
supervisors.
rid of department heads, that one just must have got by us.
Yeah. So just supervisors,
We
maybe?
went with supervisor.
Okay. I'm on to C.
In C, attendance and punctuality.
Yeah, and I had under 1, just a question, again, under that same concept, Paula, second sentence, it's their immediate supervisors, and I said, is this different? Is this, I'm
Take
trying
out
not to
immediate.
create the ambiguity. I just think it should say their supervisors.
Yep.
Okay. And then that same thing is in number 4. There's an immediate supervisor, second sentence. And then just same question.
Okay.
And it's also under E, if you're circling things there. Rest break periods.
Yep.
That's all I had on those pages, that page.
It's incredible how many times we could go over this.
Oh, yeah.
and you
And still seems
just,
to.
they just don't jump.
I think
Well,
this is-
and I think the point was well taken, that everybody that reads it's gonna read it a little different.
I think it's great to be working in this direction. None of those things that aren't that much fun to do.
In number 4, I mean, I understand what it says. You know, further incidents of absence or tardiness will be grounds for further disciplinary action up to and including termination. But when it gets into that situation, that really becomes a select board. I suppose it's not, it's a hiring, it would be under the hiring authority. Remember when we got talking about hiring authority, I talked about termination?
I think when you get to terminations, you gotta be very, very careful.
Yeah, but I don't see a page here that says very, very careful.
I'm writing a note now. Again. Terminations, do we need? Either
I
it's
think-
got
I
to
think-
reference
I think-
another section.
Well, actually, I think what it needs to be, or what it could be, I don't know if it needs to be, but I think it should say, you know, habitual incidents of absence and tardiness
Maybe
is
not. Oh.
is serious, you know, and trying to take care of things, and you know, it's not tolerated, and then somebody has to take that up, and I would think that would be the select board. I mean, it would take me a few minutes to figure out how to word that, but I would almost make it a separate, you know, I'd make that number 5 maybe, and I think I would just word it in a manner to kind of embrace people instead of kicking them off into the corner and say, you're gonna get canned.
Why don't you put it right after C, attendance and punctuality, and it says colon, just put a paragraph right there that the select board sincerely or in earnest looks at punctuality and commitment to the job and that sort of thing. And then all these things kind of relate to that, you know, all these 4 things underneath it, but just some kind of like header paragraph that
So you're
says,
looking for a positive statement before you
Yeah.
get into.
That's where I was going.
yeah, I think that would be good.
And if that's stated at the beginning, maybe it could be softer at the end.
So this is, say again, I didn't get to write down everything we were talking here about. Your
Just
thoughts
come
on
up with
wording.
something, just that we understand the importance of being punctual and people rely on you to be there at a certain time because we work as a team, you know, one of those sort of things. Accordingly, we have high expectations, or we have expectations, something like that.
So the further incidents, that still needs to be there, to be just so someone can say, well, you never told me.
Yeah, I mean, it does. I just am trying to figure out how soft or hard it should be. But it needs to be stated. And I think it needs to be stated. That it's got to come, you know, those situations need to come directly to the select board. Because like you said,
Yes.
that's the very, very careful part.
So
And it
it's
needs to go into their folder.
Maybe on that page,
So-
instead of saying draft across it, you say very, very careful.
habitual incidents of absence or tardiness will be referred to the select board, or reviewed by the select board, or addressed by the select board. Do you want something neutral there as opposed to?
You can, but you can do that, but you also need to have something that lets people know where that's going, because otherwise
it's
you have
referred-
no grounds.
When it's referred to the select board,
Yep.
it's probably things are hitting the fan.
But my question to you is, say there's someone in the highway department and Tommy has the ability to hire and fire, and this guy's, or gal is late all the time, he's done.
He doesn't have
He doesn't have the authority to get rid of someone?
I would assume. It's not our hiring authority, we just went through.
No, okay. How about the police chief then?
Police chief,
Guy doesn't show up on time, boom, why do we want?
strong chief would probably do that. But don't you think it would need to be very careful and cover the town when it should come to the select board?
Probably a good idea. So why don't we leave these four?
Terminations, if handled improperly, are going to cost you a lot of legal fees.
Yeah. That Why don't we leave these four in there after the positive statement, and not just say we.
Right, but I think it needs that,
Okay.
you know, that comes at, when the supervisor can't get their attention, then it comes to the select board. Right.
Okay.
There is a daily unpaid lunch period. Must be a law, huh? They can't eat while they're working.
You're supposed to get lunch.
I don't care, it's fine. I put on a note, must be a law. Under F, standards.
Can't stop people from working through it, but they're entitled to.
Am I overstating the obvious under standards of conduct? It says town employees, and I put insertion, and officials shall avoid any action that might create an impression of using public office for private gain. I mean, elected officials are employees, so like they said, am I? But
You get paid out of the payroll, that stipend comes out of the payroll.
so, when it comes to standard of conduct, I think if you put in there and officials, it's throwing everybody into the same pot.
And
You mean
members of
after-
boards and committees?
And officials. They're all officials, right?
Okay. It's-
Aren't they all employees under the conflict of interest laws too? Municipal employees, every single one, right? Right, they don't have to
I
draw.
think by putting that in there, if a town employee sees an official that might be their supervisor doing something that they feel free to step forward.
Easy enough to put in there, so, yeah, let's do
Town
it.
employees and officials.
I did have a note appointed and elected, but I think just if you put officials there, then.
Maybe it's not town officials.
G, vacancies. All vacancies are filled in compliance with the town's equal opportunity policy. Vacancies are announced in appropriate publications and on the town website. Then it says the Personnel Board reviews all applications, interviews the applicants who appear qualified, and refers the applications and resumes to the top qualified applicants to the Select Board for consideration.
We were
And I
asked,
circled that and I put, what?
we were asked to do that at one time, which is how I believe that got in there, to go through that whole process and then bring to the board. So I think what you saw in the bylaws, you can do that, it's not a requirement. I believe is what you went through it.
Right.
So can be asked, or by the select board, or can be asked to do all of that. If somebody said, we want you to go take that and handle all that and bring us back 3 candidates, there's no reason they can't, but somebody's got to ask them to do it.
How about
or
if
whatever.
it says the Select Board and/or its designees, or
Hiring authority?
the hiring authority, and/or its designee, but, if you want the form of thing, I don't know, but, you don't want to have, the Personnel Board doesn't need to get involved in going through the applications for who's going to drive the payload.
So it's actually the select board, hiring authority, personnel board, or other designated.
The select board or its designees probably encompasses pretty much
Everybody?
I don't think it would say the Select Board / hiring authority.
What I had
Would
done,
review the applications.
Or designated board, committee? Because you could make a committee for some purpose like they did the last time.
what I had submitted in there under that sentence after the town website was, at the request of the select board or hiring authority, the personnel board may review applications, interview applicants who appear qualified and refer their application to said select board or hiring authority. Just insert those words in there, and that's a very helpful thing then if they need help, And you can put boards in there, but I always thought that boards kind of came under the select board. Anyway, so it was-
Yeah,
So it's an option, it's not a requirement.
I'm trying to think, what it's going to be when none of us are here. Right? We're trying to do this long,
Right.
laying this road out. And so I do kind of try to push back from my position where I really think we have all the authority and the responsibility, and let's do it and move on. But, there's definitely time, just like we rely on the finance committee to
Sure.
help us through those situations, so.
That's why I had the word may.
May, I like it.
Yep, okay.
All right, almost there.
Is there a big, I'm in probationary period. Is there a big difference between 3 months and 90 days?
I had 90 days actually too.
I was just thinking,
Would you like me to
like
do
it
this?
was February,
You want 90 days instead of 3 months?
I think that's easier to know. You
Okay.
can count from somebody starts on the 11th. You can count 90 days.
Okay.
So for the first 90 days, we already discussed this, kind of hit on it. They're not going to be, if it doesn't work out, they don't get any vacation time or anything for what they normally would have accrued in the formula during that 90 days.
See, we didn't do it that way in our practice. What we said is, you're on a probationary period. If we don't like you, you're done.
And if you don't like us,
we're done. You know, it's a contractor will anyway, it's an employment thing it will, but what it gives you this opportunity to just close the door very easily without a lot of fanfare. But they always took their benefits with them, you know, in our company anyway. So, and we had policies on sick days, you couldn't accrue them and get compensated for them. But if they had earned 2 days of vacation, we paid them the 2 days of vacation, said goodbye. So it's kind of interesting. They couldn't use the vacation in the first 3 months. They could, because it was probationary time. They did accrue it. So I wasn't really sure about that, and I asked, is this legal? So that's my question.
Without looking at the prior document from 2008, I don't recall that the personnel board put that in there. I think, you know, we reorganized some things that may have been there before. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you.
Yeah,
We've done it
no.
so long. But I can put a question mark,
Yeah,
go back and look
I-
at it to see if it was there before, because
if I
I think we
take
made
it,
note of
if I
things that
take
we
it
did.
down that road,
Mhm.
and you think about it, if you hired administrative assistant, and you had him on a 3-month probationary period, and it just wasn't working out, would you really fuss about paying him 3 days of vacation time to get him the hell out the door? You know, if it didn't work out.
It's up to this board.
Yeah.
If that was
Huh?
something we've been doing and you want to change it, you
Yeah.
certainly can.
I think it's okay that they approve it.
Yeah, I do too.
I do.
Okay, so number 2 basically
Drop
needs
it.
to be, do you want to say there that you are entitled, that's the only thing you're entitled to be paid for? You don't get paid for personal days you can take, or
Yeah.
sick time or anything? You don't get your,
No, I think if they accrue some benefits during that 90 days, they should get paid for them.
but the only one it is what I'm saying, is vacation time. There's no other benefit you would pay them for, because you're not paying anybody else. So I'm wondering if that just becomes a positive statement, that you'll get paid for what you accrue, as opposed to knowing you're not going to get paid.
That eliminates you from moving all the numbers, right? Just leave it as 2 and just make it a positive instead of a negative. Additional time not to exceed 90 days.
Where you
Under B, 3B, everywhere where it says 3 months, I just kind of think it's going to be 90 days.
I had a question under concept of 3. Are we really cautious about supervisors having responsibilities and not doing them, not fulfilling the responsibilities? And when we say, upon the expiration of the probationary period, the appointing authority shall notify the employee that. And it would be nice if you said, having not heard from the appointing authority, that if you don't hear from them, you assume the probationary period is complete, is over. Because I wonder how many are really going to do one of these. It's probably a good idea to do these, but what if they don't do it, and then they have cause for termination, and someone says, you can't look back in my probationary period because you never commented on it one way or the other. So I'm nervous about requiring our supervisors to do that sort of thing.
That's a point. So you're saying if we don't, if nobody says anything, it must be good. No news is good news.
Yeah.
Do our recall the highway supervisor coming back to us after a person was hired recently and telling us, I seem to recall.
I don't
Tell us
remember.
that things were going well or something like that.
Yeah, you may not have told them, but sometimes we don't.
So is,
I
there's
say that
a
quite
part of this, no news is good news? Is that what you're looking for? Something not quite that
What you're
short?
notifying the employees, if there isn't any notification from the supervisor, otherwise it's successful.
That's what I'm trying to say.
But if you have a probationary period, don't you expect somebody to say something to you? When you were hired, they said you got a 90-day probationary period.
I would think so. If it was a full-time HR department, I would agree with you. But I'm afraid that by a lack of action, that we would become culpable there somehow.
On the 91st day, somebody says good morning to them, that's what the...
So where do you want to add that?
I don't know.
D? Well, in a sense, if somebody doesn't tell you on day 90 that you're all done, I think the town's on the hook anyway. They've now hired you permanently by virtue of day 91.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to have that, if that person doesn't pass probation that you've told them they were on for this employment, you've got to do something in those 90 days or you hire them.
Well, maybe we should leave it the way it is. You know, as I think about this, it seems like something that should be done. It really does. You know, I mean, if someone's on probation for 30 days or 90 days, that, what's up, boss? You know, I mean.
Well, I mean, actually, at the end of at the end of 90 days, somebody should be setting some goals on these employee evaluations that we talked about. Right? I mean,
Yeah, that's where they belong, yeah. But this, I mean, this, we're gonna have to sit down with our supervisors here and say, this is important stuff, you really have to pay attention to this. You know?
that's what I worry about when we go through it, we find tooth comb, somebody's gonna have to do it.
And the other thing that happens is if you didn't hire somebody with a probationary period,
Right,
it just doesn't matter.
yeah. Well, I take back what I said. Sorry about that.
It's getting
No, it's
late.
good to talk it out.
Anything that we discussed, did that change K?
Well, I had a question on K. It says, what does this mean? In your definitions, regular employee isn't there. So you say that at the end of the probationary period, if the employee becomes a regular employee, so I was pausing on that.
Employee dash
Becomes a
new.
not a full-time, but becomes a whatever, right? Becomes a non-probationary employee or something like that.
Right.
How about an employee?
An employee, yeah.
An employee of the town.
Yeah,
Right?
yep. So just strike regular there. And then again, under L, I said there should be a diagram of who does what as far as supervisors. I really think there should be like an appendix of saying who's everybody's supervisor. Ultimately, even the select board supervisors of the town, right?
And
So
that will be easy to put together when you have all the job descriptions, because it says
Right.
on each one who the supervisor is.
Right.
So that flow chart should be easy.
And I would make an appendix at the end so that you can change
change it
it.
easily.
Easier than embedding it into the middle. Yeah.
Anything under employee reviews?
I did.
Oh.
What's the matter?
But I,
Annual performance reviews are conducted annually. Never mind this, that they're going to be done from July 1st through August 30th.
That was considered a good time to do them.
By who?
Because
When everybody's on vacation?
you don't want to be doing them in the winter or trying to schedule one in the middle of a snowstorm. And you want to get it far enough out to get ahead of your budgeting season. So we tried to pick a date that might be optimum. and it doesn't say shall, so it's an ideal window, but you don't want them just constantly happening on focal point.
I think you're just making expectations there that just can never be met.
Or yearly?
Huh? Yeah,
Should
if
I
I know
do August or
performance
yearly?
reviews are conducted yearly. Yeah, that would do it.
Yes, there's vacation, but it was also a time when it seemed less stressful than when you set up a meeting and now there's a snowstorm, so, oh, we'll do that again next week.
I think you have to define a period of time, because people won't do them. And I think September, October is better than the summertime, just because people are back in school and,
That's
that
okay.
sort of thing. But we tried doing it without defining a period, and it was tough.
Yeah.
Because what happened was we came up to compensation and budgeting for the new year, and people didn't have and compensation was based partly on performance, so we reviewed, we haven't done them yet, and it was a real mess. So I would suggest September, October, something like that before the,
Well, why don't we leave a wide window and say July 1st through October 30th?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Is there 30 days in October?
31.
31, so October 31st. We don't want to chip ourselves out of the day.
Because you do want to have them all behind you before you get into budget.
I kind of took the X to M through O, because I thought it was a little trite, the suggestion awards and stuff like that. Maybe it's because I'm not used to being in.
What did you say? It's trite?
Trite.
Trite. I heard
It
you
could
say
be trite too.
I
I guess I
think
didn't eat enough dinner.
that's the part that was identified in the letter
Okay.
that was brought to the attention of the board, that this was new material that we added for your consideration
Oh,
from the personal board to the select board. So the two items included,
oh,
What was
that's
the-
where that
What
came
was the
from.
background?
oh, I see it now. It's right here in the front.
I mean, what was the,
Because you have employees in the town, in many cases, some do stay a long time. And it's nice for somebody to acknowledge that and say, hey, that's really nice. Even if it's just a letter, people like recognition. And some of us that have talked, that have worked at other places that maybe had something like that, it's a feel-good kind of thing. That somebody actually paid attention and realized you've been there that long. And that it's important to the town, the continuity, having somebody that stays. Institutional memory, all of that. And the suggestion awards would just, if people were to come up with ideas, just to encourage people to step forward. But both of those were put, for the select board to decide whether they
Yeah,
are doing that.
I mean, O, as far as time records, somebody has
Oh,
to,
yeah.
That's-
somebody has to do that. But M and N, I had a question mark on those. I guess I'm not sure where I stand on that. I mean, I think in the town of Ashfield, volunteer boards, and so trying to get the performance appraisals would be a great thing to do. Never mind trying to keep track of years of service, to
I don't know. Maybe the years are too close, the 5, 10, 15, 20.
I mean, it's not like.
What if you got a letter from the select board that says, hey, it's brought to our attention, you've been working for the town 10 years, thank you for that.
I guess I'm in favor of the notion, just not putting it in here. Because we never had it in our employee handbook or the personnel thing, but if you work for us for this much time, you get the gold watch and then the gold pen set. And it is good to recognize employees, and it is good to provide a venue for them to think of better ways to do tasks and jobs and stuff like that. So I like the concepts. I didn't want to say in an employee handbook.
It's a
it's not that it's not a must. I do believe that the employers should recognize it, but I don't think it goes in the personnel manual. And I don't know where else it would go though, because this is coming before the select board on a regular basis and is a reminder to those new boards. So I guess it does belong here. It struck me and I said, that's kind of strange.
So you're thinking it is a must that it be in there?
We could certainly, maybe, if you don't put it somewhere, it's
Yeah.
going to be very hard because the select board changes. So who's going to remember, that kind of thing. On the other hand, you might say, really, every 5, 10, 15, okay, so maybe it's every 10, 20, 25, I don't know. They could be different cycle to recognize employees who have worked for the town. Now, when I say employees, I'm not using it in the broader sense of all the stipends necessarily.
You mean the,
However, then I make an exception to my own rule and say, gee, it would be nice to hire a continue for 20 years, and it was 25. So, I don't know where you would draw the line.
Yeah,
It was food for thought.
I take
As
back
we
my
talk about it.
objections. I think it's probably a pretty good idea to have it there.
And it becomes something, and I don't know, actually, is it okay from perspective of Don McNichol that you're making at a select board meeting this public announcement of somebody's employment history? That's the flip side.
I think it's okay. I'm saying thank you.
It's positive,
I
yeah.
mean, it's good.
It goes into
I,
the minutes,
yeah, I just think there's so many other things to administer that I'm just thinking of 80% of the people that you might want to send a letter to. It's, geez, I really did want that extra piece of equipment instead of the letter, you know what I'm saying?
I do, I see that too.
Geez, I really would have liked those rubber boots to put on the fire truck, or, I would have. Maybe I'm unique, didn't take all the awards.
I can go either way on it, I really can.
I think we can come back to it, I don't think it's easy to pull out.
I put a question mark
I said, let's think about it.
And employee time records?
No, that we need.
All right, section 6, our last one for tonight, physicals.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
DOT has drug testing requirements that I'm aware of, and they might be recent, more recent than the whole manual that you worked with, all that.
on. Okay,
And my question was, what about DOT drug testing? And I had query checks and a sentence down there, whether or not the town chooses to do it, but acceptance of random drug testing, town reserves the right. It doesn't mean you will do it, but as a,
Well, these CDL drivers can get a fax any day that they got pulled.
yeah. What does CDL stand for? That was a
Commercial driver's license.
Okay, so
So
we
no,
need,
that's the DOT regulations.
oh, okay.
So they can get a random anytime, if their number comes up, they'll send a notification that, you have 48 hours to go to a site to get a drug
Right.
test.
because the DOT does that, right? It's not the
State.
town getting involved in that.
Our company had to initiate it.
You gotta make sure they do it.
Right.
So is it a DOT thing?
Yes.
But that's not all town employees, that's just Department of Transportation. Mhm.
So yeah, it's the federal DOT deal is, that's gonna take, CDL physical, they have to have a physical card. Matter of fact, I think I've got 4 or 5 days before I gotta get mine done, so.
Does that, wait, we wonder if that overlaps steps into the fire department when they drive those trucks.
There's an exception.
There is.
Well, it was just a question, because I don't know about it, so. And I said we need to define CDL one time.
Now, the quarry, even if somebody did it, it's usually not for any kind of distribution.
Boy, I don't know
I
all
think
the
that's
stuff that
all-
goes with that. I'm just so glad.
Police department, and I don't think you can release those results.
Aren't we glad that we don't run the school?
Yeah.
So the CDL is covering your the DOT issue with the drugs testing and all of that. That's part of having a CDL, you know that's going to happen? Or did you want more spelled out there?
We have in our employee handbook, we reserve the right to do random drug testing, so that when an employee comes on board, doesn't mean we will do it, we just reserve the right to, and they were handed the book the first day. And if there was ever an issue with drug or substance abuse, actually, you know, if you go to alcohol and a few other things, that you can ask that employee to report to a clinic somewhere and get back to you. Opiates, you name it, I mean, it's real life out there, you know.
Oh, answered my own question.
What's that?
Right there, fire department. It is there, highway, police, and fire. Didn't read the book.
That's all I had there.
So we gotta have physicals in a volunteer fire department for all the volunteers?
Yes, Dell, you're supposed to.
Yeah, but do we wanna put something in writing that isn't gonna happen?
The police chief had to have one. When they hired.
Yeah, but that's a more regular thing than a volunteer fireman.
Right. No, I'm just talking out loud about the one time I know specifically of is that was, you know, he had passed a physical, or have a physical, an employee.
I've talked
I
to
seem to
the
recall.
chief before
Did I?
about, they have requirements of their own.
The fire department.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be in here, but I don't know that for sure. Maybe.
But did we have to have a physical done for the highway department?
CDL, it says right here, a valid CDL physical may satisfy this requirement, so if they have a CDL license, they're taking care of it.
Right. But to work for the highway department, not all the positions, but some of those positions, would we be required, would we be requiring somebody to have one and then we would need to pay for them to have that exam?
Well, what are you thinking of? Are you thinking of the 2 kids you hired to mow on the side of the road?
No, those two I was not thinking of. As I said, not those positions.
Because everybody else has got a CDL license, or they get a CDL license within 90 days of when they get there.
Right. So within the 90 days, if they're doing it, are we paying for that physical? To go to that CDL, if we're requiring it. Want to put a question mark there for now? I suppose if the town is requesting you to have one,
But a valid CDL is a requirement in the job description.
I was thinking more like, I don't know of a position, but we're hiring somebody, we say, you must have a physical for this position. If we're stating that, it seems that would be the criteria that we're paying the cost. If you happen to have a CDL that you've had for years and you paid for your own physical, we're not going to reimburse you just because you come to work for us.
Yeah, I struggle with it. I struggle with it all the time.
Maybe it needs to say a required, the town will pay the cost of a required physical. So that if we're making it a stipulation of their employment, they must go have physical now before they come on board.
Well, that's what, it says in B, right? The town will pay the cost of the pre-employment physical conducted at the health facility designated by the town for all applicants whose positions are described as benefited in the job description. Which I think is standard operating procedure.
Right, in the volunteer fire department, those are benefited positions, so that's how.
But I think benefited is probably the key word. But I would like it,
Question.
the board to get together with them on the fire, you know, that volunteer fire deal.
Yes.
I mean, since it's not benefited, if it doesn't need to be in that line, I would eliminate it.
Say it again.
Since they aren't benefited, if they don't need to be listed there, I would not list them. I wouldn't list them there to take up space.
In the para, as a bullet.
Where it says
above.
all fire department
Gotcha.
positions.
And
And
then
maybe we don't need to list any of those. Maybe the key word is benefited. Maybe the key word is benefited, regardless of what position they're, what department they're working in. C, D, and E here on section 6. Tell me you don't have any notes in it.
I have one, but I'm not going to mention it.
Go
Well,
ahead.
go ahead.
No.
Speak now, come on.
Well, it just comes down to, then the employee supervisor may require medical verification under post-injury.
Yes.
And I said town hall, you know, I mean, I don't know who the employee supervisor is. It's a pretty flat organization, you know. So I'm just struggling for who's who, and that would come from the appendix of supervisor, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we got this.
So we got through 1 through 6?
Yep,
Yep.
Is that,
round one.
Okay,
does that give the personnel board something to talk about Thursday night?
right, and I'm gonna go back to the one about the HR personnel records to town council, the personnel board.
And I just, like I said to Paulette while you were gone, I really wonder if that list needs to be there.
Yeah, I wanted to.
It'd be all right to strike it, it would make it that much shorter. All right, good. Duncan, you got a candidate
Yes, I
for
do.
Board of Health. Carrie O'Gorman.
Carrie O'Gorman, yes.
She's a nurse.
She's a nurse.
She's all ready to go. She's got great ideas. She wants to get it done.
She's enthusiastic.
She's enthusiastic. Good. Good. So you and Shelley both recommend her for that position?
Yes, we do. Yeah, Shelley knows her. I just met her a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, so Shelley, of course, they're both nurses, right? They're both nurses, so.
Well, they're about the same age. I think they went to school together. She's a nurse in Greenfield, and Shelley works in Northampton.
Okay. So, we were kind of going over the correct procedure. So there's something kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other of, you know, the select board make the appointment, or the select board and the remaining members of the Board of Health,
I think that's the way we did it last time.
which that's probably absolutely proper procedure. So are you willing to cast a vote tonight?
Certainly.
All right. So, any questions of Duncan on
No.
Carrie or?
No.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Carrie O'Gorman to the Board of Health for this unexpired term.
Well, the
It's
unexpired term is
actually
over
till
a
the
year. I
election.
think it's up to the next election is,
So it's from now until May 3rd,
right.
2014.
I'll second that.
So as opposed to unexpired term, it's to May 3rd,
Just to make
to
it,
fill out.
to get us to the election. Any other discussion? Got a motion and a second? So, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Duncan?
Aye.
Aye, good, we got it. That's a majority of the board, the remaining Board of Health members and the Select Board, so. We could have just steamrolled it past you, but we waited for you to show up.
Oh, thank you.
So, good, we got that taken care of. How was your, any big news from your other meeting? I understand you were at a county or a district Board of Health. You were at a meeting tonight?
Yeah, it was an EDS meeting, emergency dispensing site. They went over what you need to run an emergency dispensing site. It wasn't,
Oh, okay.
it was more informative than for the people who were there.
You're not coming back saying we need $20,000 for anything in particular? So.
No.
Oh, you're making me a happy man. All right.
Can I just ask some questions?
Yes.
Duncan, is, that would be like Irene, you need a site where somebody can dispense medicines, so that's the part that's emergency dispensing site?
Essentially, yeah, if there were an epidemic or an act of terrorism, and it was decided that everybody in town needed, for instance, if anthrax was spread
Okay.
and everybody needed to, then you have an emergency dispensing site. And the emergency dispensing site is actually, for the several town region, is Mohawk High School. So we would get whatever was necessary to be dispensed for the town of Ashfield, and Ashfield's emergency dispensing site, the Sanderson Academy. And that kind of breaks it down so that you don't have a ton of people going to Mohawk.
Much more
And
manageable.
depending on the whatever the event happened to be, would that you might have to inoculate people. For instance, you could get smallpox. And God help us if a terrorist act. So people would need to be vaccinated. And you need a ton of nurses to do it because it's a procedure that it's not like just jabbing a needle in once.
Yeah, it's
and-
not just stab and jab.
Right.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
good. Glad you were able to take time to do that.
Well, I'm
Appreciate
making
it.
the big bucks here, you know.
Yeah, I know. Gotta hold it. Feet to the fire.
Thank
Chris?
Carrie first, by the way. That's great.
Yes, thank Carrie, of course. Absolutely. Chris, how'd you make out today? We saw him go in there. We figured he was assuming the position, so.
We assume the position. So the historical commission met this evening and to discuss the proposal for Wi-Fi antennas on Town Hall. And I'll kind of read what we came up with. It says, based on the balance of the benefit to the citizens of Ashfield versus the long-term impact to one of the central historic structures of the town, the Historical Commission approves the proposed Wi-Fi antennas based on the following conditions. that it is in keeping with the proposal and minimizing the visual impact of the installations. That the installation will minimize the structural impact on the building. This will likely be based on input from the Town Hall Building Committee. That the integration of the color of the assemblies, the antenna and the mounting brackets, are in keeping with the existing structure. And that there should be approval of final equipment if it is different from the proposal in the increase in the number of the antennas, the increase in the size of the antennas, or in a change of location of the antennas. And also, one thing we wanted to consider, we didn't necessarily have a proposal for this, was a removal strategy in the event that it doesn't pan out, or if it just stops being used and he moves out of town, or who knows what could happen. But basically having some kind of removal strategy in place, not just to remove them, but to repair any potential damage to the structure that they might have done. If something it starts rotting up there, and some of the columns need to be replaced or whatever. But
I think that's a good point.
So-
It may go in a few years, it may go the same way as DOS or one of those old operating languages.
I guess it's bound to its technology. So, but anyways, that's what we came up with.
Any questions for Mr. Goodgen and the Historical Commission? Thanks for doing that. Chris, are you able to work within that?
Yes,
You have a proposal for us that you want us to get moving on?
I do. I recognize that it's late, however, so if you do need to delay it, I understand, but otherwise,
Well,
we can
did
go
you
through.
email that to us, or?
Yeah, you tap it into your folders.
Right.
Did he get it?
He emailed it to me like a few hours, maybe an hour before the meeting,
So
maybe
you
half
had
an
it
hour
earlier,
before.
you would have sent it off.
Yeah, you know, I didn't have it.
Yes.
Got it printed, and Chris, I told you I would get it printed in color, I wasn't able to do that, so I was able to get access.
They've seen the images.
Thanks, Steve.
How's the cider?
Excellent. New stuff's coming along. So,
Be ready shortly or ready now?
March, April, it's wet age. It's more like wine than like beer or something.
Oh, thank you.
Everything.
We'll let you know.
Thank you. By the time we get that far along the budget, we'll need some.
So what you have is the proposal and a draft contract. Give you some revisions. If we had the opportunity tonight, it would be fantastic to get approval of this proposal or have possible changes and approve it. And with the intention of having a contract that's in keeping with the proposal. That's what I would see.
Well, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, that it was going to be
He was bringing a draft agreement.
and didn't we say that we would forward that to Donna and get her feedback on it? So hopefully next week we'd be able to read through and
Did you already put something in about the removal strategy, or was that something new that came to you this
Well,
evening?
we had talked about it, and I talked to the building committee about it, that of course I would take everything down, but it's not in here.
it's not in part of it.
But it's
But
written
it
down as
could be.
something that I would add and add.
But it could be.
Oh, it absolutely should be. And really, it's just a matter of I take everything down and then I sell it for scrap. But
Well, we don't care what you sell it for.
the potential damage to the town hall as a result of the installations, I would like to think that we can come up with an agreement where I am advised by perhaps the building committee on how to install it. They approve the way that it has been installed, and that prevents me from having some significant charge in the future associated with damage, since I had installed it as advised with their approval.
Sure. Yeah, that's not,
Yeah, his plan included, they were somehow, they weren't screwed on or anchored on, they were strapped on somehow around the column, so it's.
Which,
that sounds absolutely reasonable to me. Do we need to study this before we send it to Donna, or should we send it to Donna, have it go back and forth a couple of times while we digest it?
No, I think if we send this to Donna, it'll give us a chance to digest it on our own also, and she can get back to us and, you know, I mean, I'm looking at your termination agreement, but until I see that, what her recommendation is for the best interest of the town, it's stupid that even, well, it's silly to talk about it now.
okay.
So, I mean, you did what we asked you to do, and I think it's up to us.
That might be a place, or a different number 12 or something, that we were just talking about, the removal, that
Right.
could be added, that we could ask her.
So do you want to, my question would be, do you want to modify this and we can send it to her? I mean, you could work with Mary and,
Yeah, if you could get that sent back, maybe Donna would have it back to us by the time we met in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Because what would your timeline be? Did you want to start setting this up?
Yep, I'm right there. It says, as soon as you can allow me to give, allow me to do empirical testing in the steeple, I'll start that. Ideally before the contract. Once the contract's in place, I expect to start installing hardware within 1 week of that time and start testing. And then ideally, be able to provide service within 3 weeks of that time or when Mass Broadband actually lights the network. The network is connected and they're testing it, they haven't turned it on yet. So that's,
It's around the corner.
yeah. My time frame is really being able to provide service to people within 1 month of contractual agreement. And if I can get some sort of approval before then,
So the only thing that would hire you up is they don't light the network for 2 months after we sign.
yeah.
a quick question on WISP. Is it an LLC, is it incorporated?
It's a
What is it?
DBA.
Doing
No,
business as?
it's not, I'm sorry. WISP is wireless internet service provider.
Uh-huh.
That's what the company's name is Hilltown Networks.
The company what?
The name of the company is Hilltown Networks.
Oh,
And WISP is just the shorthand for the agreement.
The wireless internet service provider.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it should be whereas Hilltown Networks, not whereas in the second paragraph.
In the first paragraph, it says Hilltown Networks, hereinafter referred to as WISP.
Oh, okay.
so is WISP the service being provided, or is,
WISP is a common term for the type of service, for the type of company that'll be operated.
but the company, which is Hilltown Networks, is hereinafter referred to as WISP, or the
Yes.
service they're providing?
No, the company.
Huh, why don't you just call it H&N or something like that? What is,
It's just like in a contract, you might say hereinafter referred to as lessee and lessor.
so WISP is Hilltown Networks? right?
Yes.
Doing business as?
Just beforehand it says town of Ashfield, hereinafter referred to as town.
Mhm.
So then I just use town instead of town.
Okay, I was just asking.
So if I understand what you're saying, WISP actually is, in a sense, an acronym that is used in contracts of this type. It's not something you've come up with just for the contract. It's a common term.
That is a common term. I don't know necessarily that it's used in contracts of this type, but it most accurately describes.
Rather than having to say Hilltown Networks.
Yeah.
repeated
I
throughout the
can change
contract.
it.
Well, you wait for Donna, she'll, believe me, she'll put blood all over this.
Yeah, we'll come back and party the first part.
Yeah, exactly.
So, why don't you polish that up from what you learned tonight
Okay.
and get it to Mary? You have an idea, Mary, of where we want to go, so you can,
Yeah.
you
let's-
can
we get-
get together with Donna. Yes?
And when she gets it, could you just send it out so we know what it looked like before it left for Donna?
Yep.
And please ask Donna to use track changes. That is the most important thing to me. I just want to know how she
What
changed
changed?
it. Yeah, if she's going to recommend changes to it.
And we'll share with her the proposal and the contract, I presume?
Sure.
And,
Absolutely.
Yeah, because she needs to know where we all kind of agreed to go.
and is there a way that I can get approval to begin doing any sort of testing in the steeple beforehand?
Not until we get a contract, I don't believe.
Yeah, I agree.
I can get you to vote that it would be appropriate for me to go up there and point some antennas and directions to see what the noise floors are. I wouldn't be mounting anything, I wouldn't be taking power.
Be doing some research.
Yeah. If that's, I mean, if that's not appropriate, it's not appropriate.
I would just refer you to the building committee.
Okay.
How's that?
He's smiling over there.
Huh?
I see him smiling over there.
That's what I would do.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with it, as long as you're not mounting anything or
No,
building anything.
nothing permanent, just a,
Until we have a contract, I really don't want you to be going up there without somebody that has some authority or.
okay.
And she might be saying that we're doing this incorrectly by going out to a single person. I can't imagine what her response is going to be, but I don't want to be presumptuous and say, you know, have it all, just go.
I can wait.
We waited this long, we've held you up about 3 months already.
But I think to do some investigation, I don't see an issue with it if you wanted, if you're saying just pointing a few things there and it's check signal strength and such. Personally, I don't have an issue with that, but if you wanted to mount something up there that was temporary, then I'd say, maybe you cross the line.
So
How you guys feel?
Just a little bit patient.
yeah, the last committee was the historical committee that was here.
Or commission.
Commission. And I put COM. And they had a few things they cited. They talked about the removal strategy, repair. So there's a few things to include for that you're intending to work into the site use agreement for town council to work with, right? And possibly something in your proposal.
I'll add to the proposal, and then the proposal is more appropriate language from my point of view, and then town council can make sure that it agrees with
She'll
the
want
document.
something.
The contract.
She'll want something. And so when you send that to Mary, then if it doesn't go to select board, Mary, you'll send it off to us. Okay, fantastic. You can talk to me?
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you. Thanks for your patience.
We're getting it.
Yeah. What else do we have? Liaison report.
I get a couple quick things. I think it would be great if we could get to our special town meeting, an article. I've done both over, as I mentioned last week, with Decker and Nolan, and I've got 5 copies if you pass those down. This was mostly 99.9% created by town council. I had to do a little change on some of her numbers in there, were just a little bit not appropriately stated. And then this is, last time I was here, I didn't give you a copy of the boundary line agreement that we kind of are very close to with Sherry.
Okay.
And that's that. And last week I talked to them, but more important is, this is the warrant for
The boundary.
the article for the boundary line. And it'd be great, they're somewhat impatient to, because the boundary line, they can't even set bounds on this parcel until we're given permission to to work with her. By this, I can't finish up the plan, they can't do any of that stuff, so they would love to have this come before the special town meeting if possible. And the same with the easements. Remember, there's two easements on this. There's the access easement and the 20-foot easement on both properties. Love to get them done behind us.
Well, without the easements, it would be difficult to have the study done, wouldn't it?
It'd be almost impossible.
It would be almost impossible.
And theoretically, we don't have access to a driveway.
So what a great place in my mind to start discussing about the study and trying to get the money together is to say,
Special
this
town.
is if we need to get it.
So I've sent these to Mary in Word. If you guys want them in the special town meeting, she can get them right in there. She has the digital files too.
So let me ask you this, on that dam business, we get these easements done and so forth. Wouldn't the first thing we could do before we have another inspection is to get a crew in there to cut the brush and chop that up and get that? Isn't that something that they really wanted done?
We could, but the problem with that is an existing problem is that we're supposed to maintain it too, and it's real wet in there, so they need to change the grades. And if they change the grades just by a couple tenths of a foot, it's going to put more water on Decker's property. So there's this drainage concept that needs to happen. But just like the stone wall behind at the field, there's nothing saying we can't get a tree guy in there and start and taking down very carefully some of those trees. But then the argument would be is that if we did it with the trustees, we could negotiate a better price because they're doing a bigger job, they're mobilizing once instead of twice. And the same concept is kind of true for...
Well, I was just wondering if you wanted to get something done before
Yeah,
inspection.
2 years from now, or even before the inspection.
That would be a real
It
positive thing.
But just getting this done, this easement, would be a real positive thing. That's the legal work behind it, you know.
I would think it would be appropriate to put that on special town meeting. What do you think? The easement and,
Oh, sure.
yeah, both of these front, get moved. The boundary, Sherry's deal, and the easements for the dam.
What was the one we said had to go before the annual town meeting instead of special town meeting? There was something we thought. Should go
Annual
before
town
annual,
meeting.
not special town meeting.
Annual, we agreed and voted on, you and I agreed to Ashfield House. Remember, getting rid of the debt that's not associated with the Ashfield House.
I thought that,
That's the only one I remember us holding off, particularly to annual town meeting.
You had some questions, Paulette, on one of those two.
I thought it was the property one.
But I didn't
We
agree
were
with you.
concerned
Yeah.
to put before the annual town meeting because it's a piece of property we're dealing with is the town property that is bequeathed to the residents of the town. Not that the special town meeting is not the residents' town, but then if there were more people there, I think we talked about it. I don't think we had an answer about it, but we did discuss whether or not it should be at that level.
I think this, if we were cutting the piece in half or some such thing as that, maybe
Yeah, I
that would be
feel
a big, that would be a big.
This is just maintenance almost more than anything.
I think,
Isn't it 3 feet?
if I remember, it was like 5 feet or whatever it was, that, something that was pictorial like we had that helped represent that probably, because most people, you know,
We would have a plan.
right,
It
a
would,
picture.
it would be, at that meeting, it would be a large picture. It wouldn't be this size. I've requested like a 24 by 36 inch or 36 by
So
48,
people can see it.
so people can see it, and I talk my way through it for them so that they can understand that.
Yeah, it's changing it from 84 feet to 89 feet.
I think the picture says a lot.
Yeah.
Even though what you're voting is the,
Especially when it's in contrast to where the concrete bump is right now. Can you put that on the list, Mary?
Do we need to
All right.
vote on that or no?
No.
All right, just-
No, we're gonna vote on it when we sign on.
Okay.
Anything else, Ron?
Nothing else. I have a meeting tomorrow based on the management letter.
To the town
With-
hall?
Joyce, you're going to be there, Mary, and Laura. and I'll report back.
Anything, all that?
No,
Liaison
only,
report?
do you want to schedule some more chapters from this?
Our next-
Policies and procedures?
Our next meeting is gonna be, we got a budget meeting.
Next Monday is the first
First
meeting of
budget
the
meeting.
Finance Committee. budget.
Oh, really?
Right.
Yeah.
So the meeting of the 10th.
Have those been coming in pretty well?
They have. I spent the rest of the week plugging in the numbers and bring everybody a book with an initial budget sheet.
Yeah, now that we've got started on that, we'll plug some of that in, and we'll see what else comes up on the agenda between now and then.
And as opposed to putting a lot, even if we, even you knock off 1 or 2 chapters,
Yeah.
then we'll get through it.
Yeah, I think we gotta keep plugging along. I'm gonna have to excuse myself from the next 2 meetings. I didn't know about the Monday one. I should have known about it, it's my fault. But I had scheduled going out to see my new grandson in Oregon, and I was about to announce that on the 10th. That's the date I'm getting back, and more than likely won't be able to make a regular warrant meeting. And then Monday I won't be able to make, I'm sorry. I don't anticipate any more grandchildren until June this year.
Is that an announcement?
Yeah, exactly. Esther's due in June.
Okay.
But I should be able to work on a select board.
So the 3rd and the 10th,
Yeah,
so actually, we'll probably be a little abbreviated on the 10th.
if you were inclined to push it a day, I might, oh no, I can't. The 11th isn't good for me either.
But we're gonna push ahead on the budget.
Yes,
We don't
it
want
has
to
to
start, we don't want to start falling
I apologize.
behind before we even get started.
No. So can I ask the question on the budget, just because I'm sure it's in one of my emails, but are we meeting every other Monday from that
Every other
Monday?
Monday, Yep, you should have a full schedule of dates and I can send it out to you again.
If you would be
I'll
so
send it
kind.
again.
And it's, is it the Mondays?
It's all Mondays.
So it's all Mondays?
Yep, and so,
Right, there's
So
Mondays
far.
for select board
And
meeting,
then Monday for joint finance and,
budget.
and so the 3rd is the first
and then the
Finance
17th.
Committee, and then the 10th is Select Board.
And the 17th.
Exactly.
Okay, and that goes through till,
That'll go through April.
Yeah, April sometime.
Probably April, middle of April. I've got it marked down till the 14th.
Because you can always cancel.
Yep, that sounds right, because we'll be posting the warrant about that. We'll be posting the warrant by the 20th.
It's got to be posted by the 25th.
Right, and what I was thinking was that we could finalize it and sign it on the meeting on the 17th, and then have it up by the 20th, if not sooner. Because if we wait till the 24th, that's actually the day it would have to be posted. Town clerk and I went through and counted.
Weren't we talking about special town meeting on March 10th?
We're talking about special, I thought you were talking about annual.
No, but I was just looking at my calendar and I had not put that in.
Yes, and it is really shaping up for March 10th.
special town meeting March 10th.
Yep.
And you don't need to send me anything on the finance meetings, I can do it. No, it's not an issue, I've got it here.
So for this select board meeting, February 10th, did you determine which personnel policies you'd like on the agenda?
I won't
Not
be here for
yet.
that.
We won't be here, so I really don't. I think all 3 of us should be here to discuss the policies.
Oh, I see, no, I know Ron won't be, I misunderstood whether you said you do a little bit or not at all. Not at all.
And I
We
think
wouldn't have gone through, but, okay.
Would our format be to go over our questions first on chapter 1 through 6? and then go on to the next chapter, or how do you want to do it?
I was hoping we were just gonna keep going
Keep
through the
going.
chapters, so
Okay.
otherwise,
Keep feeding the personnel board with a
yeah.
fire.
That's fine.
Right.
That's fine. So do you want to schedule the next one, so?
No, we got,
You're gonna miss the 10th.
so the next one will be the 24th, where we'll
Right.
get through that. And if we can, if hell doesn't break loose, seems like we ought to be able to get through a big chunk of it.
Right.
I mean, we did great tonight, I think, because we had quite a lot of other business to do before we even got to that, so. Anything else, Paula?
No, I was just looking to see, but really, it's hard to do without. Yeah.
Just one bite at a time.
One at a time. I was trying to think, as silly as it seems, do we want to move the meeting of the 10th to like Wednesday the 12th? I don't know how your schedule is. Then we could attack some of it and Ron would be back. It's just a thought.
I would have to check because I don't have a current calendar with me here, and I've got a couple different things on Wednesday now.
Oh, okay.
Long-range planning committee on Thursdays and something
Okay.
else on Wednesdays now.
All right.
But I could, I mean, we can communicate
Okay,
about
first thing I
schedule.
gotta do is get on the right month. If you can see to the 12th,
Yep,
if you let Mary know,
I will.
then I could entertain it. I'm just looking at my schedule is,
So check on the 12th.
I just thought
if we could make the 12th, would we drop the 10th? Well, no, we gotta make the 10th to sign, well, we gotta sign the warrant. So we gotta do whatever else.
If you wanted to do a short meeting on the 10th, just to sit here, sign warrants and dot a few i's and cross a few t's, and then just use the 12th to go through the annual, I'm a little concerned that the time will get away from us, and we want to get it over to town council and back.
I'm thinking the 12th could work, but I have to just check.
You check and find out. I mean,
I'll
it's
let
not,
Mary know.
What was your thinking?
that whole week looks like crap. I mean, I
can do 12 or 13
if I don't sleep, I can do anything.
Oh, mark it.
10th, I'm in Lake George, but I'll be back for select board meeting, and I gotta go to Kingston on the 11th, and I won't be out there until midday on the 12th.
Oh,
I
it's
get back,
13
I'll
day?
get back on the 12th, time to go get my taxes done.
Is the 13th?
The 13th, I'm traveling to Middleburg, Vermont.
It's not right.
But I can, we'll see what we can do. Let's,
Well, I was
if Ron,
gonna tell Ron if the 12th was terrible and the 13th was, but if you're living here, that's a long trip.
I'm thinking the 12th might work, but I have to just check.
you check. Anything else you have? Paul?
No. I'm just worried about getting it to town council, members of that personnel board. I know Ricky's up for her time on the finance committee, her term is expiring. So she's on the personnel board. So the group that's been working on this would be subject to change depending on the election in May. So whether you'd like that out to town council and back before that happens.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do the best we can. I had a long telephone conversation with Tom today. I mean, everything's going all right, except just feels terrible about how much salt and sand he's been using. Besides that complaint on highways that we had 2 weeks ago, have you received any complaints? I haven't really. I haven't had any telephone calls about roads not being sanded or,
Was somebody in control
no,
of
I'm just,
the road at some time here recently? Was
we
Was
had
there a
that letter,
complaint?
we had that letter on West Road.
Steve
remember?
Tebow.
And that, but I was just wondering about anything else, especially since I was gone all last week and there was no telephone calls. So, sometimes, it's cold long periods of time, you put salt on, the salt doesn't work, you put sand on, that gets pushed off. And, for the most part, I use 2 town roads. Every day I go Williamsburg Road. Williamsburg Road seems to be in pretty good shape all the time, every morning. And then I go out to the west, out Watson Road, and out that way. I don't have trouble. But Hill Road's not even in too bad a shape. So I just wanted to check on that.
Yeah.
But he's gobbled, you can figure we're deficit spending probably already. Public comment, Wayne.
One clarification, usually in that you have the right or the privilege of asking for drug tests. Because if you did, you should have. If that van is running, that's a non-CDL van, and you're not covered.
So what you're saying is that all town employees should have a pre-employment drug test?
No, I'm saying that the right of the town to do it should be clarified. Obviously, if a person has an absolutely clean record and they're 80 years old, they still can pass a driver's exam, it'd be kind of foolish, but, you've got to have some
See,
protection there.
I don't think the law gives you that discretion. I think you have a policy that you're going to have a pre-employment drug test or you're not. I mean, it's either every employee has one, but you can't say, well, you need one, but you don't.
But you can do intermittent random drug testing, that is okay also. So you reserve the right in the employee handbook to do
It's only reserving the right.
I mean, I don't have a problem with everybody being pre-employment drug tested.
Yeah.
I don't. I just don't have a problem with it. But I noticed it wasn't in there, and like I said, sometimes less is more. But you want to bring that up for them to discuss?
And maybe,
Because I think most every company is doing it now.
Sure.
Well, the problem is we've got all volunteers. I really feel you can reserve the right, but if you're going to get any volunteers, you're going to have to think about it a little bit.
Yeah, but they're not volunteering if they're working for a wage, a real wage.
If they're working for a wage, I don't get a wage to drive that van. Most of my drivers don't. If I ever find them with more than one, and be able to finalize all the other things.
It's probably something we just need to explore.
Betty, do you have anything? Brian, any news, anything you want to share?
One comment along with the dam project and the wall project. Those are extremely important. But I'm having trouble separating the dam project and saying that the wall is more important, because every time the floodwaters come, and it doesn't have to take much now. It used to be when I first moved here, we'd get flooded out maybe once every 5-10 years. Now it's coming every year. There's 3 feet off from the back edge of our property. Very soon it's going to be up to our barn. In fact, every time it floods now, it washes away some on the bottom of the barn. And you can already see where the barn is starting to shift a little bit, and that's a big barn.
Sure.
And that's my concern, is because it seems pretty selfish, because we're about the only one that it affects that way. The other properties are higher. I didn't build that house. I never would have built my house then. that level. Would have put it up on stilts or something, I guess. But eventually, you're gonna have to pay attention to that part of the stream. It's not just water running in, because there is a stone wall there that is falling into the brook. And it is shifting the stream over. You can, if you stand on the
Going
bridge
north.
down here and look west, you can see where it's coming this way now. And eventually, not real soon, but eventually, it's gonna be washing away where that bridge is. And of course, it's gonna get compounded the more of that wall that falls in. Now, another whole piece has fallen in this year. And, you know, if the rest of it starts to go, we didn't put up that wall. I don't know who put up that wall.
Is that the wall behind Carl's house? Carl and Nina's house?
Well, it's on our side of the,
Oh, it's on your side.
it's in back of what we call the lot,
Yeah.
where Eisenberg's house used to be.
Yeah.
Now, when they did the sewer project, the sewer people were supposed to build the wall to the exact height that it was before. It's not, it's 2 feet lower, at least 2 feet lower. But also, there was supposed to be money, and there was money left over. I don't know whatever happened to the leftover money, it just kind of flew away. Nobody ever explained where all that money went. It was supposed to repair that wall, because it was already deteriorating then. But also, it was along with the Pheasant steps. That all went the same way as the other. But eventually, that's going to have to be addressed just as much as the dam and the wall, because it's going to cause more damage to people's property. It's not going to be stones, it's going to be flood water or just washing away of the...
Well, maybe I didn't phrase that quite right when I was talking about the wall. I mean, I think the wall is probably more immediate for the landowners that live right underneath the wall, as far as something that could happen quicker than, I mean, that dam's been built and rebuilt, but what you're talking about really isn't a dam problem as much as it is just the whole
Well,
brook
it
and
is
the
sort of
water.
a dam because more and more water is coming over. Of course, that's, you know,
And it's
people
gotta
that
go
don't
that
believe
way.
in global warming, well, this is a prime example that, yes, it is happening because these storms are coming closer and closer together. And when you do get a storm, you get a lot more rain. You don't get like 2 inches.
You don't get that nice half inch.
No, you don't do that anymore. But that's, you know, something for another day, but it's gonna catch up to us.
Well, it's certainly on the radar. All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
5 minutes after 11. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Unanimous. All right, very good night. I think we crossed everything off the agenda except that one set of minutes that don't exist.